Okay, let's pray. Mcheni kanaka Jehova tinotendera baba nechisa panguva ino Jehova shuva penyu tinoutano ishe tinoyarichisa nguva ino mukati memukenyu patichava nemusangano iwoyo Jehovha chititungamirai zvese zvatichaita Mwari zvigwe pambiri kwamuri tinozvisa mukati memukenyu Jehovha zita ramambo Jesu Kristu rimbidzwai nekusingaperi amen.
Yes, amen. We can continue with a small video that was done for our brothers and sisters from South Africa.
An ambassador of I Love Black People from Zimbabwe. I would like to encourage all our brothers and sisters in South Africa to please kindly visit iloveblackpeople.com. Scroll down to the bottom left of the page. You will see a red emergency button there. Click there, enter your details, and you will be kindly assisted. I am because we are.
Kwa jina naitwa Nixon Kiondo, ni member na ni ambassador wa I Love Black People Movement. Naikunda I Love Black People Movement shiga ni kuvile kwindu. Tunatakiwa kutokomeza ubaguzi wa rangi pamoja na Xenophobia katika nchi zote za Afrika. Cha kufanya sasa ni kupendekeza biashara tofauti ambazo zimelekewa na Afrika katika nchi mbalimbali duniani ili kusaidia Waafrika wengine wanaposafiri wapate huduma. I Love Black People Movement, tunawapenda, tunatoa support na tunajali.
Hey, I want to Nyabo this year. My name is Amara Jones from Sierra Leone, and I am an ambassador for the I Love Black People Global Movement. Brothers and sisters in South Africa, I'm here to encourage you all that we have every reason to stay together, strong, and be united in order to fight against this racism and xenophobia. I encourage you all to stay safe and stay protected. Make sure you only visit a place that is Black owned and Black friendly. In case you need any help from us, I encourage you to visit our website at iloveblackpeople.com and click on the emergency button. We will surely come to your aid. We love you and we love you. I am because we are.
My name is Natalie Kanyange from Burundi, and I'm an ambassador for I Love Black People in Burundi. Brothers and sisters in South Africa, what you would like to know, we will receive you if you are going to seek us regarding your problem you had for the moment. We are encouraging you to file a complaint at national and international level to fight against racism and xenophobia. Your union for peace is our concern. Black brothers and sisters from South Africa, we have to be strong and united to fight a war against racism and xenophobia. If you want any help or have any questions about this issue, please go ahead and visit our website, iloveblackpeople.com, and then click on the emergency button next to it in case you will need help. We therefore encourage you to visit only Black-owned businesses and friends of Blacks. We love you and we support you and help you appropriately. Thanks to our love for a moral and human person, and because we are.
Makadini, my name is Isna Chimbwanda, an ambassador for I Love Black People from Zimbabwe. I'm here to encourage your brothers and sisters in South Africa. Let's stand together and fight against racism and xenophobia. If you need any help, go on our website, iloveblackpeople.com, and click on the emergency button. We are here to help you. I am because we are.
My name is Awad Ngwenya, an ambassador of I Love Black People in Zimbabwe. I would like to encourage all our brothers and sisters in South Africa to visit our website, iloveblackpeople.com, in case of any emergency against xenophobia, and use our emergency button to get immediate assistance. Thank you. I am because we are Ubuntu.
Hello, all black people over the world. I am because we are. Let us spread love and fight against racism and xenophobia. May God bless all black people over the world.
My name is Jordan, an ambassador of I Love Black People from Cameroon. So I'm here to tell my brothers and sisters in South Africa to stay with the spirit of unity. We love you and we care about you. So together with the spirit of collective consciousness, we are going to fight against racism and xenophobia. So in case of any help, I invite you to go to the site web iloveblackpeople.com, and I'm equally inviting you to visit Black only and friendly business. So I am because we are.
Muchani Wanse, from Zambia. My name is Augustine Mpande, an ambassador under Patrice Lumumba. Today I stand and want to say that I am with you, my brothers and sisters in South Africa. If you need help, please visit iloveblackpeople.com. Let us protect each other. I am because we are.
Hello everybody. Nawafariji, msikate tamaa na hizo vurugu zinazotokea. Kama itatokea tatizo lolote, basi msiache kubonyeza kitufe cha dharura cha I Love Black People kwenye tovuti yao.
This is Khutato Tamani, a South African-based ambassador of I Love Black People. Just want to let you know that you are loved and cared for. Let us stand together and build our nation against xenophobia and any kind of abuse. Should you need any help, please do click on our emergency button on our website, iloveblackpeople.com, and let us also work together in supporting our Black brothers and sisters' businesses. Remember, we love you, we need you, and we care about you. I am because we are.
My fellow Black people in South Africa, we are with you in the fight against racism and xenophobia. If you need help, don't hesitate to visit iloveblackpeople.com. Click on the emergency button and help will be on the way. I am because we are.
Mulibanji, Inendine Andrew Magombo from Malawi. I'm an I Love Black People ambassador from Samora Machel ancestry. African people, Black people, Ubuntu, or African unity and love is our second heart. Our brothers and sisters in South Africa, the Rainbow Nation. Let's come together to live this African way. Let's join hands to fight xenophobia and racism. Together, we can. Oh yes, we can. For more information, visit our website, iloveblackpeople.com. And in times of emergency, press I Love Black People emergency button. We will be there for your help. I am because we are, and together we can.
Jambo from Tanzania. My name is Edwin Chamba from I Love Black People community. I'm here to encourage my brothers and sisters in South Africa to stand together and fight against racism and xenophobia. If you need help, you contact us at iloveblackpeople.com and press an emergency button. We encourage you to visit Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses. I am because we are.
Africa. My name is Con Glory. I'm ambassador of I Love You Black People in Cameroon. I'm here to encourage us to work hand in glove to fight against xenophobia. We have our website, I Love You Black People. Click on the emergency button and please let us endeavor to fight against xenophobia, associating with our black-like people. I am because we are, and we are because I am.
Simon said, my fellow black brothers and sisters in South Africa, we're in this together. Please be strong, unite, and focus on how to overcome white monopoly. Please don't harm your fellow black brother or sister. Visit our website, iloveblackpeople.com, to click on our emergency button in case you need help. Also visit Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses. As I Love Black People movement, we love and care about your safety and protection from xenophobia and racism. I am because we are.
I am by name Swaneza from Madness, South Sudanese, a Black African. To my fellow Black people in South Africa, my dear colleagues, I'm very sorry for what is taking place currently, but be strong, be courageous. This is not the end of the world. One day we shall come out from this racism, xenophobia, Afrophobia. Be strong, fight for your right. One day you will enjoy it. But make sure that you know the nearest hotels, shops, restaurants that are owned by a black.
Watu wa Afrika Kusini, mkae na upendo na amani, kwa sababu nyinyi Mungu anawapenda. Matata aina mahana, kwa sababu Mungu kama amekupea nchi mzuri ulioko nao, mkae na amani na upendo na mdumisheni amani. Mungu awabariki sana. Watu wa Afrika Kusini.
Yes, those were the positive messages to our fellow brothers and sisters from South Africa. We are going to continue with persons. Derry Anthony, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes. We can hear you. You only have 1 minute to present your report.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give report about the activities that went on in the Ghana group. To begin with, members who attended last week's Zoom meeting were thanked and encouraged to confirm their attendance for today's meeting. Those who couldn't attend were also encouraged to do well to attend. We also encouraged to invite our friends and family to join the I Love Black People family. A summary of what went on last week in the meeting was kept in the group for members who couldn't attend to have a feel of it. We also told that we are not always active in the group, so a list of activities were kept on the group for members to choose to do so that we'll be active in the group. We also encouraged to do a short video in support of our friends and family members in South Africa in the fight against racism and xenophobia going on over there. New members were added to the group. Rules and regulations were spelled out to them, and they were encouraged to always attend the Saturday Zoom meeting. Documents about the family were also given to them for them to read in order to know much about the family. COVID-19 update in Ghana. Since the emergence of COVID-19, Ghana has recorded a total of 98,114. The current active cases are 2,512. Recoveries are 94,796. Deaths since the emergence of COVID-19 are 806. Number of people vaccinated in Ghana against COVID-19 are 1,265,306. Derry Anthony reporting from Ghana. I am because we are. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Derry Anthony. I am because we are. Up next, we have Roland Gassam. Can you hear us? Roland Gassam, can you hear us? Roland Gassam, can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes. You have only 1 minute.
Hello. Good evening. Thank you, Yvonne.
Yes.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. Thank you for sharing. I love Black people, Cameroon. Really report date 16 July 2021. Period under review from 10 July 2021 to 16 July 2021. A Zoom meeting was successfully held on Saturday after preparation of the next conference call began. Moderator, Augustine Pendleton, member and ambassador who attend the last call and review follow. He encouraged everyone to register their attendance on the next conference call to be on 17 July 2021 while sharing the link on which people can apply to become ambassador. He called brothers and sisters to invite more friends and family members to join the movement and encouraged to continue identifying and recommending more safe places for Black people globally. Moreover, we welcome new members and insisted for the emergency button of South Africa citizens against xenophobia, which is very important for Africa unity. COVID-19 update in Cameroon confirmed case 80,859 with 1,324 deaths reported and a total of 169,921 vaccine doses have been administered. From Cameroon, here is Ambassador Roland Gassam. I am because we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Roland Gassam. I am because we are. Up next, we have today's speaker, Mr. Maponder. Mr. Maponder, can you hear us? Mr. Maponder, can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you. Okay. Can you hear me too?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, all right. Okay, first of all, I want to thank all those people who sent messages of encouragement to our brothers and sisters in South Africa. They are going through a very difficult time, and hopefully some of the words of encouragement should be able to give them some comfort. For the time that I had two things I wanted to discuss today. You know, one was to try and unpack what is going on in South Africa. And the second one was to discuss the question of what I call resource sharing. Now, let me get into the South African thing. As I mentioned to you last time, as Pan-Africanists, we must always keep up to date with what is going on in Africa. We should be able to maybe try to evaluate and understand exactly what is going on, rather than wait for somebody from CNN or BBC to tell us from their perspective, you know, what is going on. We should be able to say, no, because CNN and BBC, let's say the Americans or the British were involved in the instability going on in South Africa. CNN would never tell you that how these countries are involved. They'll try to paint a picture that, oh, look at this, you know, Black people, they can't rule themselves, they're so corrupt, they're this, and so forth, and not really get to the root cause of what is going on. I can only speak as a Pan-Africanist looking at the situation in South Africa and how it affects us as Black people on the whole. In my mind, the situation here in South Africa did not just start because Jacob Zuma was arrested. The arrest of Jacob Zuma also goes back quite a long ways. One has to analyze why was he arrested and what was he arrested for. Information, well, let me put it another way. As a Pan-Africanist, I look at Jacob Zuma as one of the freedom fighters who played a very active role for the liberation of South Africa. He paid the price. He was arrested, spent time in Robben Island, came out, joined the freedom fighters. He was somebody who was actually on the ground. He was in charge of ANC intelligence services, so that he knew exactly what was going on with the enemy and so forth. And when he became president of South Africa, he even had even more access to what was going on within, South Africa, because he now had the access to all the intelligence of what was going on in South Africa. Now, two things seem to have happened here. One, if you see, the whole process of apartheid was to not educate Black people. To them, an educated Black person was a very dangerous person. You have probably 2, 3, 4 generations of South Africans that did not take opportunity to have education the way you and I had, because the apartheid system was designed in such a way that the Black people in South Africa will remain perpetual beggars, perpetual homeless people, perpetual dependents on the state, even though the state did not support them. Now come to independence. Independence did not solve those problems immediately. By the time South Africa became independent, you could not take those 3 or 4 generations back into the classroom so that they can make up for what they missed to have during the apartheid system. So today, you have a situation where a majority of Black South Africans are unemployed for 2 reasons. One, they may not have the skills to get into employment. And then 2, their economy is not geared to take care of those people. So they are in perpetual poverty and lack of resources, if I put it that way. Because they are not part of the South African economy, they don't own any means of production, they don't own property, they don't own anything. Even the places that they live in, they either rent or they are squatters. So their relationship to the resources in South Africa is not there, it is non-existent. Unlike if you went into some of the other, independent African countries where the people own the real estate, they own the land, they own the resources, and they've had the chance to get the education to prepare them to look after themselves, to get into different professions, to have different skills and so forth. These are things that our brothers and sisters in South Africa were denied for a long time. And South Africa is in the process of trying to catch up. Okay, they now have, yes, many universities, many colleges, training institutions, and so forth. But just going through the university does not totally equip you to create employment for yourself or whatever and so forth. But you'll need that time of experience in order to be able to be part and parcel and create an is there to yourselves. Now, who controls the South African economy? I was listening to one South African commentator. All the major institutions in South Africa were owned by the state, like Eskom, the electricity company. For Eskom to run, that means many of the suppliers of materials that were necessary to run Eskom were white people and specific white families. And these families had long contracts. For instance, in terms of supply of coal to run Eskom's power stations. Yet a company owned by a white guy, which had a 10, 20-year contract to supply coal. So that even if after independence, as black people, we could not be suppliers of coal to Eskom because one, we did not have control of the coal mines. We did not have control of the transportation to take the coal there, and we did not have the relationship with the Eskom where we can go and sit down and say, okay, we need this a contract to supply this and that. Same thing applied with the South African Airways, the railway system, and so forth. All those major institutions that affect the day-to-day lives of black people, no black people were involved in it. Now, why was it necessary to get rid of Nelson, Jacob Zuma? To me, it appears on the periphery. It's part of an agenda that has been going on in Southern Africa, that the Western countries have been on a mission to remove all the freedom fighting parties that are running these countries. The result of they liberated their countries. I mean, like in Angola, it's MPLA. And there's always been ways of trying to destabilize MPLA. And as you may know, if you go into your history, there was Savimbi, who was a Western puppet, who was supported to try and dislodge Agostinho Neto or MPLA. But when Savimbi was defeated, MPLA became victorious, even though they also had the support of the Cubans, who supported liberation struggles all over, Africa and all over the world. So the Western world were not happy to see all the huge resources in Angola being controlled by a liberation movement. You go into Mozambique, Frelimo won the independence of Mozambique. But the Western countries were not happy with that. And you find that they created all these organizations, Renamo, and for a very long time, Mozambique was destabilized by these pseudo opposition parties. And then you get to wonder who was arming Renamo and for what reason. You go into Zimbabwe, we had a very similar situation where for a very long time, there have been attempts to change the political leadership in Zimbabwe, the political party. But the good thing is that ZANU-PF and ZAPU, the liberation movements, were able to defeat the white colonists. Then they came up with a program that tried to encompass the needs of the people. But the one thing that Zimbabwe had done, which we are suffering for the last 40 years, is that no black man had ever taken his land back from a white man. So Zimbabwe became an example of what a black man should never do. And we've been under sanctions for a long time. Even as late as when Trump was in power, They tried to tell us, well, if you can return land, come to an agreement with the white farmers whom you took the land from and compensate and this and that and so forth. We came to that agreement. Okay, we'll compensate the white farmers for the improvements they made on the farms. When that agreement was reached, then the Trump administration comes back and says, no, that's not enough. You must return land back to the white farmers, to the white people. If you don't do that, we're not going to remove the sanctions from your country. I mean, we had 15 years of protracted war with the whites. Many of our friends, relatives, and comrades died in that war, and there's no way we would ever reverse the land and give it back to white people. But because the agenda is that a liberation war movement like ZANU and ZAPU should not run Zimbabwe. The same thing was applying in Namibia, where SWAPO was the main force in the liberation of Namibia. But you find that SWANU and some other opposition organizations got the support of the Western countries because they wanted them to be alternative governments who did not have the strength and the confidence of having been liberation movements that took their land and resources from the colonizers. Same thing happens in South Africa. There was several dimensions, that occurred in South Africa. One was that the powers that control South African economy, they got to the point where they say, okay, look, if we don't come up with a negotiated settlement in South Africa, we're going to end up the way Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Angola, and so forth ended up with so much fighting and bloodshed. So the best thing is to release Nelson Mandela, but under very strict conditions. Nelson Mandela felt that it was better to have freedom for their people than for him to remain in jail, and then the situation continues on as it was. But instead of just allowing Mandela to come and set up his own agenda, they had to set up these conditions that the economy must more or less remain in the hands of the whites, but there would be a gradual transfer of economy to the majority. That's why they came up with the BEE, the Black Empowerment, economic policies and so forth. But that BEE was not a solution. It only catered for a very small segment of the blacks in South Africa. So what you have right now is an anomaly of a system that is not really addressing the needs of the South African black people. They have some form of political independence, but without the economic independence, that political independence doesn't mean anything. And so, because Zuma, regardless of what other things they may accuse him of, but one of the things that they were not happy about is that he did not fall into the club of those that were trying to co-opt everybody on their own terms, rather than have people decide for themselves what to do. And when you see what has happened now, the destruction of property and so forth, if you don't own it, and if you don't understand the relationship of those properties and services to how they affect your your lives, tendency is to look for a quick solution. Go and grab what is there for today. But tomorrow, today, you find that our people are now going to suffer for some time because the food supplies they used to get in the local malls and so forth, those malls are shut down. It will take some time before they are put back into service. So what's going to happen in the meantime? They can't have access to supermarkets, they can't have access to shops, they can't have access to food and so forth. So I'll be very much interested to find out from our friends and brothers in South Africa how they are coping, how they are getting around this situation, you know, where their source of where they used to go and buy food and so forth is now non-functional, has been closed down. So I had limited time today. Maybe next week we'll just continue to monitor what is going on in South Africa, and then we can take it all over and make an analysis of what it is all about. Yeah, there's quite a bit that I could have talked about, but because of the amount of time that we have, I thought I'd just touch on a few points. I hope that will help you understand, you know, part of what is going on in South Africa, so that we don't just get the version that CNN or BBC tells us about what is going on in South Africa. Okay, Yvonne, I think that's what I have for today. And then if there are any questions, just have them send them to me for next week, you know, and I can try to address them.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, thank you so much, sir.
All right.
Yes. Up next, you have the Pan-African healthcare classes. Nana Akua, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yes,
Good
welcome.
morning. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon. How is everyone?
We are fine.
Good, good, good. I am happy to see your face. Oh, Mama Denise got her camera on. She sideways though. She don't usually have her camera on. Well, thank you all for having your cameras on and letting me see your beautiful Black faces. Yes, yes, yes. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Oh, look, I'm scrolling through the pages. Okay. All right, good. So, yeah, a lot going on in the world, right? I feel like we need to take a deep breath, right? Let's do that. Let's inhale, exhale. You can do it through your nose or through your mouth. You know, there are these fire breaths, right? We should talk about this next week when we talk about relaxation, but maybe we'll do it again then. But there are these fire breaths you can do in and out the nose. Oh, I did in and out. That's my favorite. In the nose, out the mouth. Right? Or you can go in and out the nose. Right? Sometimes we just have to take a breath. Consciously breathe. Thank God we don't have to really think about breathing, right? It's one of those voluntarily and involuntarily types of actions, right? But sometimes we do just have to sit back and take a breath, settle ourselves, calm down, deal with anxieties of the world, right? So today's topic, this is our second week, right, of our Pan-African healthcare class. And we are talking about herbs, we're talking about essential oils, we're talking about homeopathic remedies, and superfoods. So that is a whole lot to cover. So I'm talking slow for now because I don't know, I'm not revved up yet, but once I get going, I'll probably get messages that I'm going a little fast like last week, right? But it's a lot of information to cover. So I don't know, actually maybe I'll go slow because I'm not really feeling I'm not really feeling it today so much to try to really rush through. I think we're going to hit on what we can hit on. And as always, you'll have the information to refer back to. So at least you'll have the information, you're armed with the knowledge, and some will get specific direction on, and some you can just use as reference. I started out as an herbalist. I've been an herbalist since 1998. Okay, 23 years. Yes, I had to use the calculator. That's sad, right? I know. Some of you very smart, intelligent people that are really good with numbers probably figured that all out already, right? I just stick with it's been over 20 years, but as I'm getting closer to a quarter of a century, I think I should say almost 25 years, right? So I've been an herbalist for 23 years. That's what I started out doing, making herbal products, studying herbs, learning the ins and outs of it. That's my first love. So I'm an herbalist first. So it's so much that I could say about herbs. I purposely gave this very abbreviated version of this herbal handout because too much too fast, I think, can be overwhelming. And one thing you must know is, of course, there are herbs throughout the planet. These all here are listed, are really what we would consider, these are mainly Western herbs or herbs from North America. Most would more so fit in the category of Native American herbs or herbs indigenous to the North America. Some others here and there are thrown in this list. In the traditional herbalism class that I teach, we specifically go over herbs through different parts of the world. So we have categories of West African herbs, South African herbs, Indian herbs, Chinese herbs, South American herbs, and then these Native American herbs. So this is really just an abbreviated version of some herbs that are commonly used for different issues. So I will try to just highlight a few. Of course, as I get going, I'll say, oh no, I gotta mention this one, and I gotta mention this, and then I gotta mention this one. So it'll be hard for me to skip over a lot of these. And you know I did not. I sat here and took a phone call before, or while I was waiting. I should have pulled up my screen, but before the screen is shared, I think I can pull it up so y'all don't see all my little saved documents, right? Not that you're gonna know what they are, but if Yvonne, you will allow me to share my screen.
Yes, you're allowed.
Okay, because see, that's what happens because a whole different screen pops up. That's why I can never, okay. New share. Okay, there it is. So, traditional and modern uses of common herbs. So this is a very old handout that I collected from a local health food store a couple of decades ago, right? And I like that it's not a lot of pages. So it's sort of a really quick, easy reference. And you can, even though I'm feeling like I need to put my glasses on, right? I just reading glasses, except maybe they're not just reading glasses and I need to just start wearing glasses. I do this every week, right? I'm aging as I get right up there next to 50. I guess I need to use my little reading glasses. So, so let me highlight a few of these herbs. These are some of my favorites, right? And I think these are ones that are worth noting. And as we know, herbs are basically plants that God created, gave the world, right? That has healing properties. We may use the root, we may use the stems, we may use the leaves or the flowers, right? So depending on what herbs we're talking about will depend on what is the most powerful part of that particular plant. And they will vary. So the first one here, right, we have alfalfa. You all can see the screen, right, Yvonne?
Yes, we can see the screen.
So you're seeing herbs here, right?
Yes, traditional and modern uses.
Thank you. So alfalfa, this is one of my favorites. This is a very highly nutritive herb, high in chlorophyll, which is what makes, yeah, I can't do the glasses. The reason I don't wear these glasses is because they give me a headache. I'm just not used to them, I guess. But hopefully you can see the screen a little better than I can. Okay, wait. Okay, I'm making it bigger. I think you can see it this way. Yay. Technology is great. If only I was very good at it. So this chlorophyll is what makes plants green. So this is what makes our green leafy vegetables or our green plants so high in different minerals and vitamins, right? And alfalfa is one of the best for that. So if you are looking for a multivitamin, a multi-mineral herb, this is probably going to be one of the best choices. There are others. In my class that I teach about herbalism, one of the sort of quiz questions is, as we go over the different herbs, I always ask people which ones are the most highly nutritive. And so yes, hint, hint, alfalfa is always at the top of that list. There are some others, and if we kind of go through them, I'll mention those as well. But this herb is high in vitamin K, different minerals, all the other vitamins as well. But some vitamins are not as widely found in other herbs, which is why I think they pointed out the vitamin K, for example. But they have is high in protein, other trace minerals and trace elements. So very highly nutritive. It's good for arthritis. It's good for bleeding disorders, good for menopause. Good for low energy. You know, anytime that you are, you know, boosting your vitamin and mineral uptake, you're always going to have improved energy and improved mobility and vitality and just overall functioning, right? I'll mention aloe because that's one of those that definitely you can find on the continent as well as here in the States and whatever other parts of the world you're in. Best thing about aloe is that it's healing internally and externally. I think most of us only know of its benefits for healing burns and cuts and things of that nature, but it's also very healing to the whole gastrointestinal system. It's a great laxative. It has listed here powerful laxative. It's really not a powerful laxative. Maybe if you take it in extreme amounts. I really consider it a mild laxative. Someone who suffers from chronic constipation, I wouldn't say is going to alleviate that by itself, all by itself. But aloe is excellent for helping to kind of clear things out of the colon and that sort of thing. And as we know, again, it's definitely good for wound healing and burns. Let's skip down to black walnut. A lot of people are doing parasite cleanses or just cleanses in general. Black walnut, and my landscaper just told me the other day in one of my properties I have black walnut trees, which I had never taken note of. So he's promised to go gather some for me. And if I get over there myself, I'll do it. But I'm anxious to kind of make some things with that myself. But black walnut is excellent for parasites and worms in the intestines, but it's also good for poison ivy and other skin rashes and skin eruptions. So black walnut hull is worth mentioning as well. I want to go down to buchu. This is, I want to say, I know it's native to here. I want to say other parts of the world is found, and it's escaping me right at this moment. But buchu is excellent for the kidneys and the urinary tract. It's great if you have like urinary tract infections or bladder infections. If you have any kind of kidney disorders or you need to cleanse and flush out the kidneys, buchu is excellent for, because it is a good, powerful diuretic, right? And it has antiseptic properties. So it has that cleansing and pulling or drawing effect. Burdock, excellent for the liver. It's a good blood purifier because of that. It's good for skin problems because, again, anything that cleanses the blood cleanses the liver. And this is how you internally heal skin conditions. Burdock is also very high in iron. Let's get down to catnip. Most of us, if you have domesticated cats and you know, I am a cat person. Some people only know of catnip for it being sort of that kind of hallucinogen kind of thing that makes cats go crazy and what have you. However, it's an underrated herb for human consumption. And so while it may be sort of a stimulant for cats, it's a sedative for humans. So it helps to kind of calm the nervous system, the emotional tension that we may have sometimes. And then internally it's good. It helps with diarrhea, flatulence, colic in children. So, you know, that kind of gas and indigestion that babies get, that kind of stomach upset. So catnip is good internally for humans, for the digestive system and for the nervous system. I know that cayenne is found all over the world, or some version of cayenne, or hot peppers and things of that nature. You're always going to find that these types of hot peppers act as stimulants. They usually help increase digestion or speed up digestion, helps increase circulation. So it's excellent for digestion and circulation, but also the effectiveness of other herbs. It's what we call a carrier herb. So it's one of those that help other herbs become more powerful or more effective in blends. Another thing that we talk about in my herbalism class, how to combine herbs and how to mix them and what makes them work in different proportions and such. I think I will have the discipline to skip a few of these. Let's go to the second column. Another one that is very popular and that I want to mention is dandelion. So dandelion is also one of those blood builders. It's a liver cleanser. So again, we already know, pop quiz, we just talked about burdock. So anything that we know that deals with cleansing the blood and the liver will also cleanse the skin, right? Dandelion is a highly nutritive herb, also high in calcium and iron specifically. So if you are deficient in either of those minerals, this is excellent to have. Also has a diuretic effect, but again, liver herbs oftentimes will also have a good impact on the kidneys as well. Has a mild laxative effect. Some people will roast it and use it in coffee substitutes. I think that that's important. Usually they'll use chicory and roasted dandelion and maybe some other kind of root herbs that they'll roast if you're trying to replace coffee. But we also know dandelion is good for hepatitis and high blood pressure. Another underrated herb I'll mention here is devil's claw. This is great for joint pain, joint inflammation, anything where there's inflammation in the joint. So whether it's arthritis, whether it's gout, rheumatism, any of these types of inflammatory conditions. Echinacea is pretty popular. This is, we know, a immune boosting herb, good and most commonly used for colds and flu, but it's also good for sore throats. It's also good for allergies. And it's a blood purifier as well. So it's good for the lymphatic system and for purifying the blood. I used to make a echinacea salve or ointment, a skin cream, because it's also good if it increases the white blood cells in the body. And so it helps you heal from like skin wounds and skin conditions and stuff. So whether it's a scrape or a cut, or whether it's an insect bite or something like that, the echinacea will help that skin wound heal quicker as well. So a lot of people just use it for colds and flu, but it has many other healing properties than that. I'll mention feverfew, because a lot of people get migraine headaches, but really it's good for any kind of headaches, but specifically migraine headaches, feverfew is excellent for. But in addition to that, it's good for arthritis and inflammatory conditions. And then of course, tinnitus and vertigo. But because it's all kind of connected to the head, we can kind of see how that would impact that. So vertigo is when you sort of get this imbalance, usually starts with an ear issue, right? And you have that imbalance where you feel dizzy and that sort of thing. And the tinnitus, we know, is the ringing of the ear. So sometimes when there's ear issues or ear sensitivities, all of that will impact whether you have headaches and things like that. So we can see how that all works together. So feverfew is worth mentioning. Ginger, one of those, when I teach my herbalism class, this is one of the herbs that you'll find in China, in Africa, in the US. So very popular. Most of us are familiar with it. We know that it impacts the digestion, helps with digestion, nausea, morning sickness, things like that, flatulence. But we also know that it's good for colds and flu and all the symptoms of colds and flu, right? And also it's good for reducing fever. You know, this is one of those that I keep in the form of essential oils. And I will give my children who, thankfully, they never had any major illnesses, but their bodies will let me know something is going on or the body is fighting off something because they stay having fevers, especially, you know, when school was in and you're around other little germy kids, you know, this was a very common thing, right? And the ginger essential oil is a very strong aroma. So of course the children hate it, but if you can do a full body bath with ginger or a foot bath with ginger, or even a cool compress with the ginger in the water that you soak the cloth in, and do sort of like a washing down of the child or the person. This will help for someone who's a senior or who, suffers with mobility issues. You might have to do, there's a word and I'm missing it, where you kind of just pat them down with the warm, or cool cloth if they can't get in the tub and immerse themselves in the bath. But ginger is excellent for reducing fevers as well. Ginseng, ginseng is sort of a group of herbs. There are many different types of ginseng, but basically ginseng is one of those what we call an adaptogen herb. So it basically kind of helps the body get back to it's a balanced state. So in the midst of illness or in the midst of some sort of imbalance, it really helps the body kind of heal itself and cope. It has mental, physical, and nervous system impact, stimulates all of these areas, helps the body deal with any stress, again, the stress of having some kind of illness or imbalance. Also kind of helps with longevity and sexual proclivities. So a lot of times people mainly use ginseng as a sex tonic, but of course that's not all that ginseng is good for. It's just a good tonic herb that just keeps the system up, not just the sexual organs, but in all, or overall, I should say. So anything that gives more vitality and more energy and helps circulate the blood, we know will also help, with sexual activities as well. Golden seal, one of my favorites. This is a natural antibiotic, antiseptic, antibacterial, antiviral, you name it. So not all of that is listed here, but this basically helps the body fight off infections. So whether it's the cold or flu, or whether it's something more serious with one of your organs or some major condition, golden seal is excellent for. It helps to heal the skin. You can use it for wounds and cuts and scrapes, for healing those, making sure there's no infection in a cut or a scrape or something of that nature. Also helpful for the digestive system. can also stimulate your appetite if you've been fighting off a fever or a cold or something, or for whatever reason you have poor appetite. Golden seal can help stimulate your appetite as well. Hawthorn is often used for like high blood pressure, but it's overall a heart tonic, helps increase circulation, helps regulate blood pressure, whether low or high. Most people use it in high blood pressure formulas. And there are so many other herbs, and I know I cannot go through each of these. Nettle is one of my favorites that's here. This is really high in iron, silica, and potassium. So this is another mineral-rich herb that's excellent to have on hand, excellent for allergies and things of that nature as well. I use it in a hair tonic or hair shampoo that I used to make. I haven't made it in a while. But nettle's one of my favorites. We've talked about, I think, some of these, we will talk about these when we talk about the soothing herbs or herbs that have a sedative or relaxing effect. But on the second side of this page, and I won't go over these specifically, but I want to mention, well, let's mention St. John's wort. This is used for pain and depression, but it's also a really good antiviral. A lot of people use it for herpes, but any virus. So whether you're talking cold or flu or COVID, any virus, St. John's wort is a very powerful antiviral. So this, I think, and then because it deals with that emotional component of depression, this could be a very powerful herb when dealing with a condition that will have that physical effect, but also cause some depression and such. So this would be one to really, really pay attention to. I think underrated herb. But keep going, you'll see some conditions listed. So this is also just for your reference, you can go through. So this kind of gives you the abbreviated version of what conditions these different herbs will address. So whether it's anemia, whether it's constipation, whether it's diabetes, whether it's prostate issues, menstrual problems, ulcers, that sort of thing, you'll have that to refer to. I also included this page here where it talked about herb safety. I think this is important. I want you to have reference to this. But in essence, herbs are very safe. They've been around for thousands of years. They've not been regulated, so it's not always written material about the herbs. There are not these types of trials and tests and things that have been done on it formally. But of course, we know, again, traditional healers, our grandparents and our great-grandparents, and our ancestors from every corner of the world have tested these things, have used them. They are tried and true. So I'm always a little hesitant to say or to discredit herbs and acting like they're not effective and that we don't know it. We do know it, and if you talk to some of your elders and do some research, you'll know that these things are widely used. But so for your reference, you'll have just sort of some common tips to follow in terms of safety. I wanted to include this handout. I also liked this handout that, again, I've had for a couple of decades now. It gives you sort of an idea of how to use plants, what parts, how to select them, and then also how to take them. I want to say a little further down. So yeah, so I like that it gives you sort of some tips. It says, take only 1 or 2 herbal combinations, at a time. Even when I used to consult on how people could heal themselves naturally, I would always be leery of folk that would come with a big bag of, products and say, oh yeah, I'm taking all of these, and it's too much. You always have to restrict how many things you're taking, because you want to know what's working and what's not, and in what combination. So 1 or 2 or 3 things at a time, I think, is a good idea from my own personal experience. And then the typical dosaging I thought was helpful here. So this will give you sort of child dosing. Most bottles, of course, will have the adult dosing. So this is helpful here. And then next, we're going to talk about homeopathics. I'm going to skip over the herbal aids. This is pretty much my favorite list, or sort of my herbal medicine chest list. So this is what I would sort of suggest that you have on hand. I don't think I'll go over that because I don't think we have time, but I've listed some of my favorites and why. And basically the point is, you know, I feel that we should all have these natural remedies on hand as opposed to some of these man-made over-the-counter, you know, medicines that we would get from a pharmacy or from a drugstore, right? And so this is just giving you an idea of what I have in my medicine chest, right? So ginger and valerian and charcoal and rosemary and elder and peppermint and echinacea and golden seal and skullcap and nettle, crane's bill. You can read through and find out, you know, why I put these on the list. So homeopathics. So whereas herbs are natural plants that we pull from the roots and stems and flowers and such, homeopathics are natural occurring substances that could be plants, but could also be minerals or other natural substances, or could be some components from certain insects and animals. So all naturally occurring, not man-made, not synthetic, made in a laboratory, but all natural occurring substances, right? And there's a whole lot to say about homeopathy. Homeopathy is basically the concept of cure, like cures like. So in one condition, what would cause the symptom, if given in the right dosage at the right time frame, that same thing will also cure that condition. So like cures like. And there's some examples here that will give a perfect example of that, right? The other thing that I'll say is homeopathics are taken what we call sublingually, meaning it goes under the tongue and you allow it to dissolve, or if it's liquid form, you allow, you know, you hold it in your mouth under your tongue so that it absorbs into the mucous membranes or the lining of the mouth and kind of goes directly into the bloodstream, as opposed to you swallowing it and it going through the digestive system. So it can have a more direct, immediate impact, okay? And the other thing to note about homeopathics is you may need to take several doses close together for a period of time until symptoms are relieved. So that'll be different for some people. I was assisting a friend recently and they were like, wait, you gotta give me some more? I'm like, yes, every 15 minutes I'm giving you, you know, and it's only, you know, if it's pellets or tablets, you're only taking 3 to 5, but you're pretty much just every 15 minutes for a couple of hours until symptoms subside. This is very normal. This is sort of the standard course of treatment for homeopathy, right? And you do it on what's called a clean mouth. So you would not have eaten or drank anything other than water for at least 30 minutes. So it can take some effort, but it's worth it. So for some people that's used to just swallowing something down and going on about their business and not thinking about it again for another 4 or 6 hours, this may not be the natural remedy for you. However, even though I'm an herbalist and have been an herbalist long before I started having children, my children have always taken to homeopathy more so than herbs. So, and it's easier to administer in, say, infants or toddlers and even seniors because it doesn't have to be swallowed down. So imagine having to make a herbal tea or giving a young person a capsule of herbs. It's just not possible. They can't swallow it. You have to do a lot of preparation to steep the tea, cool down the tea, administer the tea in the little dropper or the little toddler spoon. So it can be cumbersome trying to administer herbs to children anyway. Homeopathy is very simple. Drop them little pellets under their tongue. They'll be trying to chew them up rather than just letting them sit there. But either way, it's a much easier way to administer the natural medicine. So homeopathy, I love it. Even though my first love is herbs, homeopathy has played an important role in my life as a mother. And I think that it can be very helpful for most people. Only other thing is you also, if you like mints, like if you do peppermints or other mints, you always have a mint in your mouth or something like that. That's not something you can do using homeopathy, because the mint is so strong of an aromatic that it will affect the potency of the homeopathic remedy. So you wouldn't, have mints in your mouth, even mint toothpaste. If you're really doing a serious treatment with homeopathy, you would get a mint-free toothpaste, or just use some charcoal or baking, baking soda or something like that, or something that's flavored with something other than mint, because it just won't interfere. It won't hurt you, but it'll interfere with how effective the homeopathy can be. Because again, you're putting it under your tongue. And so if your mouth is having this strong aroma of this mint, it will affect how effective it is. So allium. Allium comes from the onion. And just like if we take in onion, right? Onion will give us teary eyes, right? So this is that example of like cures like, right? So because it is known to cause tearing of the eyes and dripping of the nose, it is a remedy for common cold, hay fever, things that will give you, right, that watery discharge in the nostrils or in the nose, not nostrils is the nose, in the eyes and the nostrils. So this is that exact example of what causes the condition can cure it. So allium is a homeopathic remedy that's used for those types of conditions. Arnica, this is another plant-based one. This comes from the mountain daisy. Arnica you can use internally or topically, but this is good for injuries, basically. Any kind of traumatic injury, whether it's shock from the injury, whether it's the pain caused by the injury, whether you would do something internally or externally. So those explanations are there. Chamomilla, another plant-based homeopathic. This comes from the chamomile plant. This, of course, I've used a lot while the children were teething, or if I took them on the plane and I needed to kind of knock them out, quote unquote, right? And I needed them to rest or sleep. This is a sedative. And this, of course, will work much better than, say, chamomile tea. It's more direct, it's more powerful. So often, most often used for children with teething and colic and that sort of thing, but can be used for adults in any age. Hypericum comes from St. John's wort. We've already talked about St. John's wort, right? So we know it's an antiviral. We know it's used for depression. But we also know that it has other effects for the body. So injuries to the nerves, anything like, say, if you slam your toe or a finger in the door or something like that. This is good for those types of nerve pains or shooting pain with the fingers, toes, back, things like that. Ignatia, this comes from the same Ignatia bean. This is used by psychiatrists. This is great for mental health conditions such as grief, anxiety, depression, things of that nature, okay? The trauma from bad news like the death of a loved one or separation or divorce or something like that. Magnesia, phosphorica, this is phosphate of magnesium. So this is a mineral-based homeopathic, right? So this is used whenever there's a deficiency of magnesium, which may be indicative of women's menstrual cramps, but it can also be any other kind of cramps. If you get leg cramps or you've overexerted yourself working out or working in the garden or whatever, this is good for any types of cramps. Nux vomica, this is plant-based. This comes from something called poison nut, which is not actually a poison nut. But this ailment is good where people have maybe overdid it with drinking, and where there's nausea or where there needs to be a purging. Nux vomica is the remedy for that. Pulsatilla, this comes from windflower. This remedy is great for women and children, usually for like psychological or mental issues, because it has that gentle sedative effect, where it can kind of help improve or change the emotional state. And, you know, of course, the way they have this word, they're acting like women are the only ones that are emotional. I know a lot of emotional men, but pulsatilla is the remedy for you if someone needs to kind of be calmed down, or they really need to, you know, balance their emotions. Rus tox, this comes from the poison ivy tree. And again, in the right dosing, taken at the right times, the same thing that will cause the issue can heal the issue. So this is for poison ivy, right? So this is when you have come in contact with poison ivy. This is a natural first aid kit exclusively using homeopathic remedies. So again, this is just for your review, but typical things, if you're out or if you injure yourself, these are things that help with different types of injuries: bruises, insect bites, strains or sprains to the muscle or joints, things like heat stroke, these sorts of things. This is a good list to have on hand for that. With this next section, this is aromatherapy. So aromatherapy, this is basically, so these same plants that we've talked about, like say in the herbal section, there's a process where they extract the essential oils from different flowers of certain plants, right? And the essential oil or the essence of that flowering plant is used in aromatherapy. It may be used in baths. It may be used as a compress. I already gave the example of the ginger baths and ginger compresses for reducing fever. It may be used for cleansing your face or doing a facial steam, soaking your feet and adding it to some Epsom salts and helping with tired, achy feet. You might use it in an aromatherapy diffuser where you add water in and drops of the oil, and it emits the aroma of those oils into the air to create a more healing environment. You may use it in a spray mister, you know, where you kind of spray yourself or your area to get the aroma in. You may add it to a carrier oil, right, where you then use it to massage your body or your feet. So there are many different ways to use essential oil. So this gives examples of that, tells you what are carrier oils. Most essential oils, in most of the uses, you would dilute it, unless you're putting it straight in a diffuser or something of that nature. But you're usually going to diffuse it in a carrier oil. There's some carrier oils listed here, right? And then you will apply it however, you know, based on what you're doing. It's giving you examples here of how you might dilute it based on what form of application you're using. Some of my favorite essential oils, clove, I love a lot. It's great for toothaches and pain and things of that nature. Clears up infections. It's good for muscle pain. It has antiseptic properties. Another one of my favorites is cinnamon. I love the smell of cinnamon, but it also is an antidepressant, an antiviral, an antibiotic. So it's good for colds. It's good for arthritis, rheumatism, even psychic awareness. I definitely use it a lot in my incense and some spiritual baths and things of that nature. So cinnamon is one of my favorite. I've always loved frankincense and myrrh just for the aroma in and of itself, but we know that frankincense is great for mental fatigue. It's good for aging skin. It's good for respiratory problems. Also, it's great if you want to help enhance your dreaming at night. It's good for that. We know that myrrh is often used spiritually, but it is an anti-inflammatory. It's good for coughs, bronchitis, mouth sores. It also helps with preventing aging skin, also good for diarrhea, and also stimulates the thyroid. So a lot of times people will use myrrh and maybe rub it on the throat to stimulate the thyroid if we're trying to lose weight or if we have a sluggish thyroid. I've already talked about ginger oil. A lot of people love lemongrass. Not my favorite. but this has a lot of uses for psychic or spiritual awareness. It's a nerve tonic. It's good for digestion, fighting off infection, good for acne. So it's used in a lot of skin or facial formulas and things of that nature. So we could go on and on. Tea tree is very antiseptic, antibiotic, good for like foot fungus or nail fungus. I know a lot of men who maybe don't get a lot of air in their feet and always have socks or enclosed shoes, and will develop foot fungus. Clove is excellent for that. Tea tree oil is excellent for that. So I encourage you, soak your feet, take care of your feet, get rid of those brittle, really rough looking nails and things, and any kind of moisture in between the toes. These essential oils are really good for that. And so there are others. I can't go through all of them at this time. I didn't know this one was sideways too. So okay. And then the last section is superfoods. I think what I will do is sort of break for a second and go through some of the questions, because I know we are getting close to the end of our time. And I know that that's a lot to take in. Right? So, and I know I probably went a little fast. I tried to slow it down a little bit. I'm not as high energy today. Oh, I don't know, maybe I am. But it's so much information, it's impossible to cover in an hour. So it's not even something that, you know, we know that you're not going to get each and every piece of this information, which is why I have put great effort into giving, you know, really detailed handouts and things. So again, I always encourage people, we're in the second week of this class, but every class I always encourage you, get a binder, you know, or folder, but some designated place to put in your materials so that you can keep them organized, so that you can quickly reference them when you need to. That's what we need to do. So I'm just scrolling through. I'm sure the administrators have scrolled through. There's some people asking about how to be ambassadors. I'll let them address that. Thank you all for the greetings and the welcome. I appreciate everybody that's here and took time to write a note. And where do I get my herbs from? How to get a copy of this? She was showing. So, however, whatever the process is for getting into the WhatsApp group, I think, and usually the administrator kind of puts it in the chat at some point, and if they haven't, I'm sure they will now. That's probably the best way to do it. There may be a waiting list to, I guess, officially be in the WhatsApp group, but I will also leave my email. So I will gladly, you know, forward the materials that I'm discussing. And it depends on sort of where you're from. Someone's asking about how to get, or where I get the herbs. You know, I've dealt with different distributors for so many years. I have certain places I get herbs from. Some you have to have an account, some you don't. If you're in the States, there are food co-ops like Frontier Food Co-op that you could possibly join. I think you have to have a sales and use tax license. So like basically you have to be a wholesaler or be able to have a wholesale account. But there are a slew of companies. One of the local places I like this in Maryland is St. John's Botanicals. But there is Hamden Gray in Florida, Mountain Rose Herb. There used to be a place called Jean's Greens. Some of the smaller ones, as opposed to, of course, going to a big Whole Foods or Moms or Sprouts or some of these places that exist. And then, of course, internationally, if you have access to Amazon or, you know, whatever places that ship internationally that you can get herbs. I guess it depends where you are and what you have access to. Of course, not all herbs or herbal companies are created equally. But there are some really good distributors on Amazon. So definitely, if I don't order from one of the places I have accounts with, meaning if I don't have a large order and I'm just trying to get a few ounces and not a few pounds of something, I've definitely used different distributors off of Amazon. Yeah, and again, in different parts of Africa, go to your traditional healer. Go to your local herb shop. That's how, because I can't say it enough, because I know that there are herbs I've mentioned that you may not have access to. I wish I could provide that for you, but I can't. So you'll have to go to a local person that specializes in herbs, and that's going to be your traditional healer, or your traditional priest, or and there are all kind of negative names y'all probably are familiar with, which I won't say. But there are these traditionalists who specialize in these herbs. That's who you will go to. Because just because I'm saying it and I'm on this platform saying it, you don't have to just use the ones I'm saying, and you don't have to get it from wherever I'm getting it. Because there are some very knowledgeable, respectable, traditional folk who specialize this in your area. So if you look, a little harder than maybe outside of your norm, you'll find them. From a francophone country. I'm sure there's several francophone countries listed. I don't know. So if somebody's asking about, didn't get the information. If you didn't get my information, I will put my email. You can send an email specifically about getting added to the group. But there are all countries represented. I'm sweating here, y'all. I don't turn my air conditioner on because it makes so much noise. So my little fan that's blowing, I suffer this whole hour every week. I don't have central air. I have this loud window unit. But I think it would interfere with us for the class, so I don't cut it on, and this little fan is not doing a thing. So I think I have answered I think I answered most of the questions. And we have a couple more minutes. So, but thank you for writing stuff. Some of the stuff is more so for the administrators. So hopefully they will address that for you. The last little bit of information is on superfoods. So superfoods are those foods that are so highly nutritive that they say that they are just extraordinary foods. That simply means they will have a lot of your vitamins and minerals, much like the alfalfa that I mentioned is sort of one of those super herbs, right? And so they will be packed with nutrition that will help optimize your health, help you get whatever macro and micronutrients that the body needs, and really help you fight off, diseases and disorders, and that you should add into your, your daily diet. So there are things like almonds and broccoli, avocados, salmon, blueberries, cinnamon, and sweet potatoes on this first list. These are foods that you should definitely put into your food regimen or your diet. And it tells you all about why. This section here talks more about seeds and nuts and that sort of thing, things that people might include in their protein shakes or on cereals or use as like a supplement. So these are things like the acai berries, goji berries, the cocoa powder or cacao, which we know we can find in Africa, right? Seaweed is more of an Asian thing, but hopefully there are stores you can access that. So all these sea vegetables are always going to be high in minerals. Things like chia seed, mangosteen, maca powder. These are all more like powders or supplements that one would add to their regimen, usually through shakes or powders, shakes or cereals or things of that. And then, and honestly, I don't know that I added this into what I sent out because I had to kind of scan things by hand to send out daily handouts. But what I want you to do, and I don't know if they're still requiring you to write something that you learned, but I highly encourage you to kind of go back through, pick out what herbs really resonated with you, even the ones we didn't mention. But if there are ones that you're like, oh, wow, that's really interesting, or I really need that, and take note of it. So even if I didn't include this handout, on some paper, write down herbs or highlighted herbs or herbs I'm interested in, and really highlight those herbs and really get to know more about them, figure out how you can access them if you can. If not, maybe pick another herb. But of course, we want it to be something that you can indeed access and use in your everyday regimen. But pick out maybe 3 to 5 herbs. Same thing with the homeopathics. I know the short list, and believe me, there are hundreds of homeopathic remedies. Same with herbs. So that 10 most common homeopathic remedies, know that there are many more. But same thing, if there were some that really stood out to you, if you have a job, you work with your hands and you often kind of injure yourself, you know, you may be prone to the hypericum or the arnica. But pick a couple of the homeopathic remedies, get to know more about those, see how you can add those to your regimen. And same with the nutritional supplements. That would be where you can add here the essential oils. What essential oils might become useful in your daily life with yourselves or with your children or other family people that you may be in charge of their care. And then the superfoods. What superfoods stood out to you? You may say, oh, I love blueberries. Oh, okay, I didn't know it had these phytonutrients and it really, you know, helps with so many conditions. Or, oh, I love the taste of cinnamon. Didn't know it had these different vitamins and nutrients in it. But really use this as a review. I want you to not just listen to what I'm saying, but figure out how you can utilize these things. All of this information is made to be very user friendly. And the point is to not only just gather the information, but to also figure out how you can use it. And this would be one of those things I would say, pop quiz, or something I think you should know, right? Because I know I talked about fever. So as you're sitting and listening, you all should know what of the herbs or essential oils that we talked about, what addresses fever. I highlighted one of them, is ginger. Give yourself a hand clap if you knew that right off, or if you remembered that. Pain, we talked about at least one herb, well, actually then a couple of homeopathics, right, that deal with pain. Devil's claw was one of the herbs that I said that was an anti-inflammatory, dealt with pain. Constipation. I specified that plant because I said, I know that that grows in the Americas and on the continent of Africa, right? Constipation, aloe vera, right? So I want you to start thinking like that, going through this list and saying, yeah, she talked about what helps with this, that, or the other. You know, oh, upset stomach. Well, we know that she didn't only say ginger deals with fever. Oh, it's also good for upset stomach, right? So colds and flu, there were several that we talked about colds and flu. We talked about echinacea, we talked about nettle, we talked about golden seal. So all of these things, I want you to really be able to get a full understanding of and be able to use so that you're better. The point of this, I know some of you do it because you want to be ambassadors, but I hope that you really take this serious and know, hey, I'm really getting good information that's going to help me and my family to feel better and to be better. So I hope that you got a lot out of today's session. I don't personally use sea moss, but I do find, I like all of the sea foods and sea vegetables that we get. Blue-green algae, chlorella, sea moss, spirulina, all of these, they're so rich in minerals, definitely good to add. So if that's something you've added to your regimen, that's a good thing. Yes, keep breathing. Yes, keep breathing. We definitely need to keep breathing. From New Orleans. Denise from New Orleans. Denise, that was you to answer? No, that was Deborah. Okay, yeah. Breath is everything. Breath is everything. I like to say I'm Ghanaian. Somebody's asking if I'm Ghanaian. I was born here in the States, but I do, Ghana is the only African country I have been to up to this point. Tanzania is next on my list. But I have so much that I do in Ghana, I can't seem to carve out enough time to go other places. But no, born here, but Ghanaian at heart. And once I go some other places, I'll probably say I'm something else. But hey, that's the thing about a diasporic African, right? Some of us don't know exactly where we came from. So it's wherever I feel at home, and I feel at home in Ghana. So that's my time. Thank you all for joining. I put my email, so if there's a question I didn't get to or something else you want to ask, feel free. And I'll see you next time. And as always, I bid you good health and peace. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, thank you so much, Nana Akua.
You are welcome.
Yes. Up next, we have Dr. Wright. Dr. Wright, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to you all this Saturday. I guess it's evening for some of you. So, one, there's so much going on, and I want to stay on cue because there is so much going on in terms of events on the continent of Africa and around the world. So if we're talking about Pan-Africanism, right, we know that there's a lot going on in South Africa, there's a lot going on in Haiti, there's a lot going on in Cuba. So I want to actually, I'm trying to get my camera right because I'm not alone, so I don't want everybody on the camera. So you had readings this week, and first off, I want to start with just the simple quote that I put up and then go back up to the film. Then go on to the chapter that you should have read as well in this very short hour, okay? So hopefully we'll get to all that and give you the opportunity to ask some questions as well. So thank you. And so, okay. Hello, everyone. Okay, so sometimes I try to read the comments too while I'm doing this. So first off, so I'm going to share my screen in order for people who are not in the WhatsApp group to follow along. I thought about showing a little clip, sharing my screen and showing a little clip of Spencer Wells. And I want us to have a brief discussion in the chat about the film. The film is not necessarily part of the course. It's like the prerequisite to the course, which is why I share it, right? So the Journey of Man, a Genetic Odyssey, so I'm going to address that briefly, right? so that you know what I wanted you to pay attention to and to emphasize, and not think that I endorse everything. What I endorse in there is the science, right? That adds to the theory, long-standing theory, or something some of us would say we always knew or know, which is that Africa is the home, is the birthplace, is the origin of humanity, and that to be African means to be human. To be human means to be African, first and foremost, for most of the 200 to 300,000 years on this earth, okay? So, and that's important, okay? I did share materials in the group. Did you not get them? Okay, so I don't know. Maybe let me see what's happening on the administrative side, because there's a lot of stuff in my WhatsApp group. So I'm going to talk to admin about that. But the readings are there, the chapters, along with, I gave you kind of like a prompt on Wednesday as well to kind of, you know, just massage you into some conversation. I didn't get much back, but no problem. We'll get it together this week, okay? That being said, let me get started straight away. I'm going to, in a second, share my screen. So you won't see me for a second, but you should hear me. So what I'm going to share is, first and foremost, the readings from Booker T. Washington and Africa, Pan-Africanism, Pan-Africanist, Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism, and Pan-Africanist. And what this, the objective of this chapter was to simply introduce you to how Pan-Africanism as a concept came about. Okay, how it formulated, how it developed itself in the world, the historical moment where it constituted itself. Okay, so 1 second, you're going to see it. You're going to see the chapter momentarily. As I share the screen. So, and I'm just going to look at the conclusion and one very small point that I want to highlight in the chapter so that you can understand what was a critical and important moment in Pan-African history as it constitutes itself. And then the other is just the takeaways I want you to get from the actual chapter, okay? So 1 moment, let me just make sure. And I will investigate as to why I have been on my end, at least having a little trouble. When I send stuff to the group, sometimes I guess my documents are too big, but it's interesting because we've been doing this for a while and I haven't had that problem until now. So, so we will see. I will troubleshoot and see what exactly happened. All right, so here we go. Opening a little slow, so 1 moment. Okay. All right, so there you go. So this week's reading, along with the film was really light. It gets much heavier, so I do want to, admin, can I talk to you after this and find out, you know, how we can troubleshoot, because maybe there's an issue. Maybe I need to be sending it a different way so that it opens up. I know that I've had to send everything twice. However, you all should have gotten this chapter in the WhatsApp group along with the film, right? The Journey of Man, a Genetic Odyssey. And then this was our chapter. Pretty light for this week. And then the quote for this chapter was the prompt also for this week, just to give you a reminder and sort of like the bare bones understanding of what the journey of, what this first chapter in terms of defining Pan-Africanism is all about. And so this chapter is from my book, and the book is called Booker T. Washington in Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist. And this chapter in particular is called Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist. Now, let me just say this. I'm not saying that this is the only content on the formulating of Pan-Africanism. I'm saying that the key ingredients, historical ingredients in terms of the formation of Pan-Africanism are without a doubt in this chapter because I put them there, right? So I'm not saying I don't have any other sources. I'm just saying that the key points that I want you all to know and understand are definitely in this chapter. And this is why I gave preference to this particular chapter over any other, as opposed to the fact that I wrote it per se, okay? That being said, I also don't want you to be confused because I think Pan-Africanism has suffered under confusion. I saw in the group, because I do read the comments and I try to comment, and I noticed some, I got a little confused and commented on something else as opposed to one thing or another. However, I saw someone say something to the effect that, what is Pan-Africanism? Pan-Africanism hasn't done anything for us. And that is not true. However, the person is completely correct in their analysis that maybe one, or put it this way, I could totally understand someone not understanding in concrete terms what Pan-Africanism truly is beyond a feeling. Feasible. That's totally possible, right? Why? Because in real time, this is certainly not something you would have learned in school. You would have had really special parents if you learned it at home. And beyond saying I'm a Pan-Africanist, I identify with African people, Black people all over the globe, there has not been anything that has, in concrete terms, educated the masses on what Pan-Africanism is. And there's a reason for that. That would be diametrically opposed to white supremacy and culture, talking about the unification of African people. Certainly on the continent where Europeans have created borders, divided people ethnically who were one people and turned them into people from different nations. Certainly that would be the case in the diaspora, where we are divided regionally between the Caribbean, Central, South America, and the North American continent via our imposed national identities, right? So you certainly would not be encouraged to learn, study, or talk about Pan-Africanism for any reason. And if you discuss it, it is reduced to a notion, a feeling, an affinity. Oh, I like other Black and brown, Black and African people, okay? And so this is where we dissolve all of the doubt, all of the confusion around what exactly Pan-Africanism is. And you should have read that, but if you didn't, I will reiterate here, okay? So Pan-Africanism really, we can say, emerged, if you've read the chapter, emerged at a particular moment in time in the world, around 1900 because you have an organization called the African Association that is led by, or at least a member of this organization is Henry Sylvester Williams, who initiates what would be called the first Pan-African Conference. Okay, very important point. I'm not saying he initiated Pan-Africanism, but this is the first time this term is used, and a constituted conference gathering that is Pan-Africanist in nature, meaning Africans from around the world coming together to look at our condition and use unity as the primary tool in eradicating our oppression. 1 second, I want to just put my, okay, because I'm on my device, but I'm going to switch to my computer so that you can also, we can revisit some of the learning outcomes that we want to achieve. 2, so Pan-Africanism is budding in the world, and this conference taking place in 1897, well, in 1900, was planned in 1897, or they began planning in 1897, to hold this conference, which would bring all African people from around the world. Let me get into this quote, and then I want to go into the historical context, because what you should understand is that Pan-Africanism, as it constitutes, as it's budding, growing, developing, evolving in the world, is a ideology that is contributed, that is the, how would you say, is the product of contributions of Africans around the world who share the same condition. And so I'll give you a little bit of the history, because we are all scattered abroad having very similar experiences, and therefore coming together and producing unity is our greatest weapon. Okay, and so when you see the bare bones definition of Pan-Africanism, you get an understanding of what that means for us. Okay, so this chapter opens up with a quote from Booker T. Washington. And let's be very clear. The individuals I talk about in the context of this study, look at them as proponents. And we are always in position to qualify their thoughts, speech, and actions, okay? So we want to look, don't get caught up with, you know, those of you who are from the US and may know who Booker T. Washington is. Don't get caught up with what you historically know about Booker T. Washington, because I'm going to let you know that for the most part was given to you by white scholars, okay? And so put that in the back of your mind or out there on the side, right? This right here is primary information coming right from those individuals. However, all of the individuals we discussed in the context of Pan-Africanism as it's developed as an ideology, and their proponents and the organizational and institutional actions around it are up for study. They're up to be qualified. They are up, we are looking at them to qualify, to analyze them, to extract from them what we need, okay? So, you know, nothing is beyond reproach in the context of our study of Pan-Africanism, right? So Booker T. Washington, yes, a controversial figure in the context of American society. However, covertly behind the scenes, he was doing things that were connected to Africa. And this is one of the things that he did in terms of his study of Africa. He wrote a book called The Story of the Negro, The Rise of the Race from Slavery. And in it, it is a study, a survey, an examination of African people and culture before they arrive in America and experience the institution and tragedy of enslavement, okay? And so in that book, The Story of the Negro, he writes this quote: there is, however, a tie which few white men can understand, which binds the American Negro to the African Negro, which unites the Black man of Brazil and the Black man of Liberia, which is constantly drawing into closer relations all the scattered African peoples, whether they are in the old world or the new. I have rarely met in America anyone of my race who did not, in one way or another, show a deep interest in everything connected with Africa. The millions of Negroes in America are almost as much interested, for example, in the future of Liberia and Abyssinia, which is Ethiopia, as they are in their own country. There is always a peculiar and scarcely definable bond that binds one Black man to another Black man, whether in Africa, Jamaica, Haiti, or the United States. This is a profoundly Pan-Africanist statement. If I remove the title or remove the name here, you very likely would not have been able to place who said this, right? Because this is a very broad, sweeping, but very accurate in many ways statement about Pan-Africanism. What connects us? Okay, so what Washington is saying, and because at that moment in time, he is learning that we are all connected, our conditions are very similar, and yes, diaspora Africans, Black people in the diaspora are the scattered children of Africa, without a doubt, okay? So this whole chapter basically gives you a historical context for Pan-Africanism. And I'm gonna fast forward to the critical point in history where many Africans make a contribution to Pan-Africanism as a budding concept, okay? And I will seldom read to you. I'm going to try to illustrate more than I read, but however, for those who are watching virtually elsewhere, I want to be able to give you the actual text so you can follow along with what we're doing. So right here, one second. Okay. All right. So here we have, just so those of you who do have the text, let's see what, I don't see what page this is. Oh, it's 16, okay. So here we have in the chapter, the historical context for the emergence of Pan-Africanism. Yes, there was the African Association, Henry Sylvester Williams out of Trinidad, and others initiate the first Pan-African Conference. I'm giving emphasis because that's an important point, right? As you will see later on. However, this conference, he's out of Trinidad, based in the UK, in London, and he attempts to, he being Henry Sylvester Williams, initiate a conference that would bring African people from around the globe to London to participate in this conference. Booker T. Washington His role is that he is actually a key promoter in the United States and also of the first Pan-African Conference, and also a promoter of the conference. That being said, he and W.E.B. Du Bois would also participate in the first Pan-African Conference. However, Washington would not attend. He would participate behind the scenes in the plenary sessions, which there were 2 leading up to the actual conference, but also a major promoter of the conference. Why is that important? He has significant control of the Black press in the United States and would have been able to spread the word widely through the main form of communication, right? The Black press, the newspapers, all except for one paper. And that would have been probably Monroe Charter's paper. But however, Du Bois probably had a relationship with him, so it probably was in there too. That would be a good research topic. And, was it promoted in there? That being said, Washington would not attend the conference. Du Bois would. This would be a very important point going forward, because Du Bois would do something very important and critical going forward after this conference in 1900, and we'll get into that. That being said, this idea of the unification of African people for the purpose of eradicating oppression everywhere we are is bubbling all over. It is a budding concept. It is bubbling everywhere we are. We are percolating. We are moving. We are communicating. And part of what we're doing today is also an example of some of the type of energy that existed then. We were having conversations with each other about our condition everywhere we were. So this conference would be the embodiment of some of this activity. But it's not to say that there was primacy of our condition in the United States, in the UK, in the Caribbean or Central or South America. Those places aren't given primacy. It is the idea that wherever we are coming together to protect ourselves. Sound familiar? To protect ourselves from this thing called white supremacy and culture that is expressing itself as colonialism, capitalism, imperialism, and later on neo-colonialism, okay? And African people everywhere are contributing to this. So the bare bones definition of Pan-Africanism that emerges out of the first Pan-African Conference is the unification of African people for the purpose of eradicating oppression everywhere we are. It's not the unification of African people to have a good time. It's not the unification of African people to, just dance and sing and engage in the artistic aspects of our culture. It's not the unification of African people to just even trade and buy and sell. It's the unification of African people for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation, which are indicative of these world systems, right, that are emerging. And yes, listen, some of you may have a problem with it, but capitalism is problematic because capitalism exploits human beings to the depths of their humanity. They become commodities. And no other group of people have suffered under capitalism more than the African, because make no mistake, the African in the diaspora is the commodity under capitalism. He, she, we are bought and sold. Right? So we always, as Africans, have to be careful, as Black people and African people, be careful about how we talk about capitalism. Capitalism is not merely buying and selling. The form of capitalism that emerges in this period of time in the world is one that buys and sells us. liquidates us into assets and money. So it's capital over flesh in every way. And the other expressions are colonialism, where Africans are not bought and sold, but their very bodies are exploited for the labor in excess, in extreme, right? And imperialism is capitalism leaving its borders, right? So the point of it all is that everywhere we are, we see how we are exploited. Unity is our greatest and strongest weapon against all of those exploitative systems. So I'm just going to go to the text really quickly here so you can see. And I take a little bit of a whirlwind tour around the African world to tell you, hey, here in Haiti, here in the United States, here on the continent, here in the UK or in Europe, this is what Africans are doing, saying, thinking, and the contributions they're making. And then I take you back historically and say, no, this is not new for us. We have been talking about Pan-Africanism and moving in unison for hundreds of years, okay? So prior to the first Pan-African Conference, 19th and early 20th century Pan-Africanism in the US was espoused and practiced by individuals like Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, Martin Delaney, Edward Blyden, Henry Highland Garnett, and Alexander Crummell. But as early as 1829, David Walker's appeal reflected on the history of African civilizations and made a connection between those in Africa and Africans scattered abroad. His appeal not only aimed to challenge the institution of slavery, but to eradicate the masses on African history and culture. Pan-Africanists amongst the African populations in the Caribbean included the initiator of the first Pan-African Conference, Henry Sylvester Williams of Trinidad, Marcus Garvey's mentor, J. Robert Love, and Dr. J. Albert Thorne from Barbados. But decades prior to their emergence, the Haitian Revolution occurred and bolstered Pan-African consciousness in the diaspora as well. Haiti would produce Benito Sylvain and Antonin Furman, both whom met Booker T. Washington in 1897 and attended the first Pan-African Conference in 1900. Out of Haiti came a wing of Pan-Africanists who created literary discourse on diasporic philosophies on Africa. The African population in Haiti produced Jean Prince Mars and Louise Joseph, who repeatedly explained that Haiti was the embodiment of the irresistible force of a united Africa. Okay? Pan-Africanism had a dialectical characteristic to it, and that's something we're engaging, which allowed historic events like the Haitian Revolution to produce a response and rise in consciousness amongst African people internationally. Similarly, in 1896, the Ethiopian victory over Italian imperialist forces in the Battle of Adwa also bolstered the connection between diasporic Africans and those on the continent. The social climate and consciousness of the African diaspora in the Western Hemisphere and throughout the world produced two of the most prolific Pan-Africanists, W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. Each of these men had important relationships and exchanges with Booker T. Washington. Marcus Garvey's relationship with Washington would open the door both literally and figuratively to the first mass organization of the African world through the Universal Negro Improvement Association. However, Washington's relationship with Du Bois would be inconsequential to the progress of Pan-Africanism. The relationship between Washington, the apparent accommodationist, and Du Bois, the Pan-Africanist scholar activist, has shaped African-American social and political history in the US for at least a century. Booker T. Washington, Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey would all function differently as Pan-Africanists. The methods they employed varied, but like previous Pan-Africanists, they all had one singular objective beyond unity, which was to advance the plight of African people in the face of oppression. Okay, so major point. Let me, before I switch back and you can see me and I lecture a little more, let me just skip to the conclusion because I want you all to understand just the key points of this chapter, okay? And the point of me reading that was just to, once again, let you see and illustrate how this idea and concept of Pan-Africanism was a collective thing between, or a collective consciousness, you can say, amongst African people in the world in light of our condition. Marcus Garvey, who is one of the most prolific and profound Pan-Africanists that would emerge from this period, is known for stating this specific thing, that when all else fails to organize the people, conditions will. When all else fails to organize the people, conditions will. It means we all are in a similar condition everywhere we are. Now, it's very likely that what I say to you today may not quicken your consciousness. However, the hardship of the conditions imposed on you will quicken and your consciousness, undoubtedly. And that is what Garvey is saying. And so that whirlwind tour of all of these individuals who are talking about our unity for addressing our condition are indicative of that. What we are doing here in this study, in this examination of Pan-Africanism, is not new. We are in a tradition. We are on a continuum in history. You should know that. And our strategies and tactics in light of our situation and condition, they also are not new. We are refining them for the time. But this dialectical relationship where we dialogue across oceans about our condition is something that we have been doing at this point for hundreds of years. Okay, so the bare bones concept you should come out, and this is in the course outcomes. The bare bone definition you should come out of this course understanding, knowing, having a working understanding of is the unification of African people for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation. That is what Pan-Africanism is. Now, that brings us to the qualifying aspects of it. If we get together and nothing comes of it, that's not necessarily Pan-Africanist. If we come together and it is destructive to African people, to Black people, that's not Pan-Africanist. Pan-Africanism qualifies the production. When you go to a concert with a bunch of other African people, Black people, that ain't Pan-Africanist. Because if it's not going to do anything to eradicate oppression and exploitation and be to the benefit in a concrete way to African people, it's not Pan-Africanist. There are a lot of Europeans who orchestrate the bringing together of African people, not to African people's benefit. Hell, that's what slavery was. They brought us together on plantations to work for them. our labor produced something for them. Being together didn't make it Pan-Africanist. So, you know, that's where we get into the qualifying conversation. To whose benefit? When we come together for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation and can qualify that, it can be deemed definitively Pan-Africanist. And there shouldn't be any mystery in weighing and measuring the benefits. The benefits of this should be obvious. So just to go over the conclusion, because in this conclusion, if you notice, this conclusion hits all the major points that you should have gleaned from the chapter. Just to recap, this book, in essence, was a teaching book, okay, in the sense that it was meant to teach and facilitate the learning of individuals, not just a sort of a book for a book's sake or a book to sort of impress the academy, which, I took it out of the academy. So it wasn't meant to oppress the academy. It was to inform the people, to put a figure like Washington back in the hands of the people, but also to claim his contributions to us in the form of Pan-Africanism. Okay, so the conclusion states, Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanists established the origin of Washington's Pan-Africanist philosophy, which was rooted in his connection with the culture that produced his mother, who in his eyes represented the best of African people. It also established Washington's role in early history, in the early history of Pan-Africanism, and his relationship with two important Pan-Africanists of his time. A literal definition of Washington's Pan-Africanist philosophy would be the unification of African people for the express purpose of eliminating oppression and promoting independence through industry, which would lead to liberation, both economic and otherwise. Washington's expression of Pan-Africanism was primarily concerned with action and practice rather than theory, rhetoric, and inspiration. This is why, let me pause there. This is why in our conversation this week in the group, someone said, hey, like, what is Pan-Africanism? What has it ever done for us? Right? Because many of us are familiar with Pan-Africanism being associated with just theory, rhetoric, inspiration. Oh, we're all African. We feel good. We're all Black. Let's feel good about that. Let's not succumb to the negative imposition, of white supremacy and culture's view of us. But it's bigger than that. It's more concrete than that. Okay? Washington's form of Pan-Africanism is still true to the bare bones, concrete core of Pan-Africanism, which is the eradication of oppression and exploitation and through the use of unity, right? Using unity to eliminate exploitation and oppression. However, the other Pan-Africanists would have the same bare bone core to it and different strategies. Right, Du Bois and Garvey. So I'll go on. Let me read that last part again. Washington's expression of Pan-Africanism was primarily concerned with action and practice rather than theory, rhetoric, and inspiration. So his role was not evidenced by the bringing declaration, but by providing the building blocks for self-sufficiency, sustainability, nation management, and building as demonstrated on a micro level at Tuskegee, right? Which is the institution. Washington's role in early Pan-Africanism has been buried in history and for the most part played out in the shadows of his life. However, Washington always desired to know and understand Africa and its people, and this desire to connect with both was rooted in his childhood, Determined to educate himself beyond the stereotypes and demeaning depictions of African people in America, he researched the history of Africa himself. As a result, he deemed the plight of African people a righteous and worthy one, and was consciously determined to become involved in Africa in some significant way. Washington readily engaged the emerging Pan-African world, and through his relationship and correspondence with Henry Sylvester Williams, we see he is one of the first to publicly declare Pan-Africanism a movement. In the context of this lecture and this course, I'm asserting that Pan-Africanism is an ideology, a theory, and a practice. Okay? But at the time that it emerges in this world, in 1897, around there, but with its big first conference in 1900, the world is informed of it, right? So he was diligent in promoting the first Pan-African Conference and attended plenary sessions with Du Bois and others. Although he did not attend the actual conference, he promoted it and supported it with his presence and participation at the numerous plenary sessions. The conference set the stage for the flowering of the Pan-African movement throughout the African diaspora. Pan-Africanists from the diaspora, Africa, and Europe began a discourse around liberation and the condition of African people in these locales. This setting produced two of the most important Pan-Africanists of the 20th century, W.E.B. Du Bois and eventually Marcus Garvey. Each man had a relationship with Booker T. Washington, and we revisited those relationships as documented through the Booker T. Washington papers. W.E.B. Du Bois' relationship with Washington was not what it appeared to be. Washington's personal papers revealed that each man had a legitimate issue with the other, but the public discourse around the programmatic differences was not the real conflict. For those of you in the diaspora in the U.S. and stuff who are interested in this, the Du Bois-Washington conflict, go back and read the chapter. I clear up some of that, but I won't belabor that point because in a larger international context, the Du Bois-Washington conflict really is almost irrelevant. Okay, it was. I'm gonna say it one time, and unless you ask questions about it, I won't belabor the point. The Du Bois-Washington conflict was created, maintained, embellished, written about for 100 years by white liberal scholars who are interested in being divisive. However, when you look at the facts, it does not bear truth. It is not accurate, okay? Meaning the conflict is not accurate, and Du Bois himself, as I addressed in this very chapter, so if you go back to the beginning, the Du Bois-Washington section, you will see I talk about how Du Bois himself admits that he had no real programmatic difference between himself. There was no real programmatic difference between Du Bois and Washington, okay? So, and I can put Du Bois on Tuskegee campus in the summer of 1903. Really, to be quite frank, for the rest of the world, it is almost irrelevant, okay? It is largely a U.S. and diasporic conversation that is not really relevant and important to the larger picture and discussion of Pan-Africanism. That being said, but the public discourse around the programmatic difference was not the real conflict. However, the public debate and discourse between the two men impacted the social, political, and intellectual landscape in America for decades to come. Du Bois and Washington each had their own, Du Bois and Washington each had their own distinct impact on the African world that had very little to do with each other. So in other words, they developed separately as Pan-Africanists. They would develop as Pan-Africanists, separate and independent of each other, and make very different contributions to the African world. The first Pan-African Conference created a buzz, and W.E.B. Du Bois, who declared that the problem of the 20th century would be the color line, emerged as a leader with the as a leader with the creation and establishment of the Pan-African Congresses that followed. Eventually, these Congresses set the stage for the discourse around African liberation on the continent of Africa, I should say. And the fifth Pan-African Congress held in Manchester was the most significant. African leadership vowed to push for the complete and total independence of Africa from colonial domination. Du Bois' leadership of the Congresses would be one of his greatest contributions to Pan-Africanism. Let me stay on that for 2 seconds. W.E.B. Du Bois, important point, sole survivor of the first Pan-African Conference in 1900. He would be the youngest and the only person living in 1919. A beautiful thing, because not only does he live, he is the only person living, and he has the consciousness to say, we need this work continued. And the way we continue it is to create the Pan-African Congresses. Anybody who studies Pan-Africanism should know. 1900, the first Pan-African Conference. 1919, the first Pan-African Congress, in which there would be 5 consecutive Congresses, the fifth being one of the most important in 1945, the Manchester Congress. And it would be, the Congresses would be the think tank through which African leadership would come together and discuss the fate of the continent. Pan-Africanism would have its highest expression on the African continent as African leadership talk about the total liberation and independence of the African continent, right? And Nkrumah would emerge as one of the most important, and along with several others, Patrice Lumumba, Jomo Kenyatta, Amilcar Cabral, all of which we will discuss here. But this is important because it is the think tank, the Congresses would be the think tank, right? Where people come together, African leadership comes together and says, no, Ghana can't be the only independent African nation. This one, the Congo can't be the only one in the grips of the struggle. We've got to fight for total liberation of the African continent, and then the ultimate continental unity, which continental unity protects us from the exploitation and the oppression of capitalism, of imperialism, of neo-colonialism, okay, where we are in blackface advancing white agendas. So very important. This little guy from, this little academician, Du Bois, coming from the United States, has the insight to do that. And he, like Washington, like others, will have many contradictions. However, this is the one thing. If I were to say, what was his destiny? This was his destiny. I don't know that he could have made a greater contribution with all his writings and all of that. The idea to initiate the Congresses, which would be continued and become the space where African leadership comes together and actually creates the organization of African unity. It's in that space of the Pan-African Congresses. And the organization of African unity grows and transforms into what today? The African Union, which, yes, we're going to get there. We're going to, as we talk about Pan-Africanist organizational bodies, we will talk about the African Union and can it carry through? Can it stay true to the original vision and mission, which was to come together for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation, born out of these congresses and born out of the first conference, right? So these are really important points in terms of understanding the history, and just not even understanding the history simply, but understanding that this is a continuous history, that this is a continuous struggle, right? Whenever you feel like, damn, there's nobody else, you know, is anybody else thinking what I'm thinking? Is anybody else seeing the larger picture? Is anybody else had their consciousness raised as a result of our conditions? Yes, absolutely. This has been part of the tradition. This has been part of the struggle, and it is certainly continuous. Okay, so that is Du Bois. Du Bois' leadership of the Congresses would be one of his greatest contributions to Pan-Africanism. And then there's Marcus Garvey. On the other hand, was inspired both in the theory and practice by Booker T. Washington to build the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and serve African people. In the realm of African diaspora history, Garvey was said to find the African population in America with a wishbone and gave them a backbone. This is a fallacy. I had to dispel that. The philosophical position and literal presence of Marcus Garvey, who is from Jamaica and comes to America in the US, is non-existent without Booker T. Washington, right? So philosophically, Garvey adopted Washington's views on self-help, race pride, and independence. So theory and practice is what Pan-Africanism is. Garvey adopts much of what is the Tuskegee model and philosophy in his building of the UNIA. Some people don't know that, okay? Most people don't know that. And then later on, it is Booker T. Washington who challenges legislation in the United States that allows Marcus Garvey to come into the United States. But that being said, Garvey adopted Washington's view on self-help, race pride, and independence, which were all also the foundational principles of the Tuskegee model. According to Garvey, the UNIA was modeled after Tuskegee, and the historical facts reveal Garvey could not have entered the United States without Washington's successful opposition to the African exclusion measure, which was designed to lock out the thousands of Africans from the Caribbean, Central, and South America who had labored on the Panama Canal. Washington's effort did not stop providing in the wake of his death. Garvey entered the United States in March of 1916, specifically to visit Tuskegee to see this model, this sustainable model, and I will share that chapter on the Tuskegee model in Africa so you can understand what Tuskegee was. 4 months after Booker T. Washington's death, and a little over a year after the racist measure was defeated in January 1950. So in a multitude of ways, Washington made the emergence of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Universal Association in the United States possible. What Marcus Garvey would do is plant his seed of Pan-Africanism in the fertile ground known as Harlem, right? He was a combination of the 19th century Pan-Africanists that already existed in the United States, but his unique contribution was the reassertion of nationhood for African people, okay? And so I'm gonna stop there. My point, oh, well, you know what, hold on. Let me just give you a tad bit so you can see the images. This is the International Conference on the Negro. If you were in the course, you saw the chapter, I'm showing it again, and those of you who are not, this is an actual image from 1912, International Conference on the Negro held at Tuskegee. This is the space where Garvey actually learns, or this conference is the reason Garvey actually learns about Tuskegee and the sustainable model. I'll share that chapter, the Tuskegee model in Africa, so you can understand this whole concept of independence through industry and what it means for the African continent and independence on the African continent, and the independence and sustainability of African communities around the world, which is intricately tied to our liberation and our economic liberation around the world. However, this conference took place where Tuskegee opens up its 44 industries and invites 8 educators from Jamaica who bring the word back to Marcus Garvey, which is their connection. This is how Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington have a connection, because the people who witnessed the sustainable industrial community that Tuskegee was share the word of it, and Garvey contacts Washington, develops a relationship, and Washington invites Garvey to the United States. Garvey is inspired. He takes this microcosm that is Tuskegee and attempts to create a larger organization that spans the world. The universal, because he's last, I don't want to de-emphasize the impact of Marcus Garvey as a Pan-Africanist. Marcus Garvey would create the largest Pan-Africanist organization the world has ever seen, and the largest Black nationalist organization the world has ever seen. Never before or ever again or since has the world seen a mass organization of African people created and spanning the world like the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Okay? Never before and never since. 47 chapters of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. So just think of, when I share chapter 3 with you, which is not required reading, I want you to just cursory, just in a cursory way, read it. I want you to look at, the model that is Tuskegee, and imagine that model being imposed on the African world. Okay, so this is the actual conference at Tuskegee where those two connect. And if you don't know, because U.S. history and what happens in the diaspora is not always relevant to what's happening on the continent of Africa and other places in the world. But if you don't know what Du Bois looks like, here's a little picture of Du Bois. This is a scan of the book, so it's not the greatest picture, but that was W.E.B. Du Bois, right? A very young W.E.B. Du Bois, initially a family friend and mentee of Washington. Later, Du Bois became Washington's chief critic. He founded the Niagara Movement and the NAACP, a proponent of Pan-Africanism and direct protest, who pushed for social and political rights in the U.S. And then here is none other than Marcus Garvey, a young Marcus Garvey, the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, who launched the first mass organization of the African world from his base in Harlem. And how he gets to Harlem most definitely is through, yes, Washington's challenge to the African exclusion measure, which allows Garvey to come in. Now, in the context of this course, what we actually will do is look at those two cases that Washington engages in that are critical in understanding Booker T. Washington's contribution. But really, where we're moving next in the next session is you will get a chance to look at those conference resolutions. The first Pan-African Congress, 1919, right? Initiated by Du Bois, the sole survivor who has the consciousness to initiate such activity or initiate such a body, really. And then you have, of course, going on the consecutive congresses ending in 1945. So we will look at the conference or the Congress's resolutions for both of those, because we'll start to look at what organized bodies are saying and doing around Pan-Africanism, okay? Because what the Congresses and the first conference establishes is that this is a global issue, okay? This is a global pandemic, okay? White supremacy and culture. It has been the scourge of the earth, really. And so everywhere we are engaged in the struggle. I'm going to stop there because I'm sure I'm over time. and I want to just at least get one or two. Yeah, I'm 3 minutes over, and I really didn't want to lecture like straight through, but I wanted to just get this foundational lecture out of the way so that when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we're not talking about things that don't do anything for us in a concrete way. We're not wasting our time with that kind of stuff. When we talk about Pan-Africanism, we know that it produces on a material level, on a political level, on a social level, something that is needed by African people and eradicates our oppression and our exploitation everywhere we are or in that locale. So I wanted, that is, if you look at the, I can go to, well, I won't do that now, but I'll start our next session out with it again, which are the learning outcomes that we will have in this course. And you will see that knowing the basic understanding, having a basic working definition of Pan-Africanism is one of those things that you should get out of this course. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to try to take some comments. I'm squinting because I don't have my glasses on this time, but I'm going to. All right, so let me just say something about the WhatsApp group. I did post all of this chapter in the film. The film is also embedded in the syllabus, The Journey of Man, A Genetic Odyssey. So go and watch that. No, I don't endorse everything Spencer Wells is saying. What I endorse is the science that qualified the theory that humanity began in Africa. Okay, that humanity is African, first and foremost. Okay, Spencer Wells has his own issues, meaning that he is a geneticist, so he's capable of conducting the scientific work that's needed to have this discussion about Africa and humanity. But he also's got to plug his own culture. He says, Europeans created science. That's a lie. Okay, African people have been preserving bodies, human bodies that are still in Western museums today. You must master not only science itself, but the human science, right? The biology, the body. We are the first scientists, the first doctors, the first physicians, obviously. Europeans are very late. Let me just give you a historical timeline of how African people and Europeans. African people, we know that we have been here on this earth for the last 200,000 to 300,000 years. The European has only existed for the last 7,000 to 8,000 years. End of story. 200 to 300,000 years, 7,000 to 8,000 years. Okay, they're a non-issue. Really, it's about what we're going to do. Once again, because there will be a moment where they emerged 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, and there will be a moment again where they will not be an issue numerically as a population. Okay. And I'll get into why I'm saying that. That's just data, okay? The average American, white American in the United States is 60 years old or older. The average white American, okay, in the United States. 20 years remedies some of that. What we are focused on is the ideology, the thinking. Their pathology will live through their descendants and will live through us if we allow it. How many people are not white but play out white pathology, which is racism, which is xenophobia, right? What is neocolonialism other than white pathology playing out through African people? So what this is about is the struggle for the minds, right? In the Americas, we won our bodies. We took our bodies back from the institution of slavery. But what we are engaged in, why we are doing this, is that we are struggling for the minds of our people so that we can once again be able to preserve ourselves and our well-being and live the full and free life that we have a right to as human beings on this earth. All right. So, okay, I'm gonna stop there because I will just lecture, and then lecture some more on that point. Thank you. Okay, so all right, so some people have issues with the connection. All right, I see that. Glad to hear. Thank you, Matthew Tomei of Liberia. We have a case where we're going to be looking at Liberia and the Liberian crisis, which is one of the examples of Pan-Africanism. I don't want to miss the enlightenment class. Yes, thank you. I'm glad you do come in, and Amir Dali. Yes, we need to know our history. It is key so that you know that you're not in this struggle. You're not doing anything that you're doing, especially as ambassadors of I Love Black People. You're not doing this for the first time, right? This has been our constant and ongoing struggle. And what we need to do, what history allows us to do, is to problem solve and is to, refine our strategies and tactics, right? To not have to go and reinvent the wheel, and to know what to leave behind and what to take forward, right? That's why we study history, so that we can refine our problem solving methodologies, our methods to solving problems, to refine our strategies and tactics with an understanding that this situation and this condition is ongoing. Yes, Manchester, England. Absolutely, Deborah Kelly. That's where it is. Well, you're asking me why did it happen in Manchester? Interesting point, right? I couldn't give you the exact answer for that, but I suspect because there were other gatherings of African people. So you must understand that even though the slave trade is over, slavery is over in certain places, the exploitation of African people is still going on, obviously. And what happens, if you go back to the chapter, you'll see that there's a number of gatherings of African people in Europe. Okay? And these gatherings are sort of what precipitates, they capitalize on these gatherings in terms of the first Pan-African Conference. You can see that. It's stated blatantly in the material. And this is why a lot of that book or that chapter, you see their direct quotes. I did that. There are block quotes because I want people to see the historical record, right? Not my words, and then I'll interpret it. I'm the historian. I interpret the history. That being said, it is important for people to see the actual historical record. There was a gathering taking place in Europe. And also, undoubtedly, let me just address what you're implying, or maybe not implying, but inferring, and the subtext of that. Why Manchester? Why the Western world, right? Basically, why in the white boy's house? I'm just gonna be clear. Why in Europe? Because I'm, as an African person, my destination is never Europe. My destination is always home, the continent of Africa. Now, if I have to pass through Europe, okay, so be it. But it's not my destination. So I feel the same way as you. Why Europe? Unfortunately, even in the context of our struggle, we're going to get into the conversation about class. The people who are coming together to discuss this and strategize around our problem and our condition are people who are absolutely of an intellectual mold, breed, what Nkrumah would go on to call the intelligentsia. And there are class issues to deal with there. Okay, so it was, those settings are African people who are of the intellectual class seizing the moment. Okay, not necessarily ideal, certainly should be held on the African continent. And some of the great Pan-Africanists will never make it to the African continent. Right? So, you know, that's the deal. I have gotten you clear that Pan-Africanism is not just a theory and inspiration, but an action oriented which actions can we engage in the economy of the African mind. I'm going to talk about that. Right? If you're in this organization, this is part of what you're doing, right? So you all are ambassadors and I love Black people. This course right here is an ideological development course. So that to help facilitate, to help develop you to more adequately do the work that you're going to do. There are a number of things that you can do to help transform the thinking of African people. However, let me be very clear. That quote, the statement that I quoted by Garvey is very critical. When all else fails to organize the people, conditions will. I don't want to ignore what's really going on. That's why I'm sorry, we're already out of time, but like the situation in South Africa right now. Right? African people are getting hurt. So now, and we know that there has been an issue with xenophobia. When these issues come up, when these clashes, when these conditions come up, because certainly very often Europeans provoke conditions in our community and they impose the larger condition of white supremacy and culture, right? These are the moments where we in the spaces we start to identify the behavior. Right? So, but I'm going to talk more about that. You will come to understand what an ideological transformation is, what ideological development is. Nobody does, there's very little human beings do without ideology. Now, the ideology can either be conscious or unconscious. Most of our people are acting unconsciously. What we want to do is engage in conscious behavior. That's what this is about. No revolution, no independent struggle in Africa took place without ideological development. Right? Which meant the people were developed. They understood what they were doing and why they were doing it and who they were doing it for. Right? So, but when people are unconscious and not developed ideologically, they can be used as objects. Somebody else's ideology and agenda can reside in them and play out through them. And this is very often what we see. Our people, the world, around the world are enthralled in unconsciousness. So that's my answer. We're going to get more into that because you are in that process. That is what the process is in this course in particular. It's really blowing my mind that these Pan-Africans did for us. I like to know what challenges they face and what the solutions they did. I will give you absolutely. That's the point. You're going to learn all of that. I'm so glad that you're with us, right? Because to be quite frank with you, this probably this course could shape how you view everything that you do, right down to how you deal with your families, how you work as an ambassador for this organization, how you move in your institutions. The struggle here is to move you from unconsciousness to fully conscious, and then consciously engage in Pan-Africanism, meaning both in theory and then in practice and action, carry out things that are in the best interest of African people. Our people, and just so you know, Alan, Okello, there's, many of the things that we experience now are what our people were experienced 100 years ago, to be quite frank. It's always a struggle for me as a person who studies history to see how, 100 years is really like 2 minutes in historical terms. Our condition has not really changed that much. In superficial ways, yes. In the substantial ways, no. Okay, so many of our challenges then were very similar to our challenges now. I don't want to talk too much about the Du Bois-Washington conflict. If you have not read chapter 2, please, well, it is chapter 2, but the readings that I posted for this, but Du Bois, just to give you a cursory, Du Bois and Washington really were victims of divisiveness in the United States, and as a result, how can I say it in a succinct way? Really, the conflict was a generational conflict, a young junior senior man conflict. Okay, Du Bois did not want to talk about that generational conflict between him and Washington, so he essentially intentionally wrote that their conflict was programmatic, that Tuskegee was an industrial and vocational school, which he knew that it was not. It is a school for teachers, and that he was for social political rights and advancement, and that Washington was not. He knew that that was not true. He just did not want to air the dirty laundry in terms of their real conflict. He himself, I'm not saying this is not my opinion. If you read the chapter, I give you the citation. Du Bois talks about it himself later on after Washington is dead. He says, really, that wasn't my problem. My problem was Washington's Tuskegee machine, his secret network of power brokers that he used to silence people of my generation. So it really was truly a generational conflict. When Du Bois writes that in Souls of Black Folks, that it is a programmatic difference, white people, white liberals, white scholars latch onto that, embellish it, and create almost 100-year history and scholarship on this pseudo conflict. So that's in short what it is. But it really, in the larger picture, in the terms of the world, it's irrelevant. It's a very domestic type of American issue. It's a non-issue. I'm about to publish something which will give some clarity to it. But the funniest thing is that when people hear, people who know about that, they become invested. And we have to understand that we live behind enemy lines in the United States, right? We are brought here. We've been here for hundreds of years. However, this is not our place, and whatever goes on between Africans will be exploited. Whatever goes on between African people will be exploited. So when Du Bois says that there is a difference between him and Washington doesn't want social and political rights. He's producing, manual laborers, vocation. That is taken and exploited. And Washington becomes the accommodations, and Du Bois becomes the social political activist, and white American scholars pretend like they prefer Du Bois, which is comical, okay? Because no white person or white institution prefers the more radical Black person. But that really wasn't truly it, right? What you need to know is that the conflict wasn't really real. Du Bois stated a pseudo conflict in order to not divulge his real personal conflict with Washington. Either way, whatever he divulged about a conflict with another figure, and Washington was internationally known at the time, it would have been exploited by white America. Whatever he said. Now, that being said, you know, so we have to weigh and measure that. And sometimes it's fine for us to talk because we've got to converse. I'm sure there are people watching and listening right now who don't have our best interests at heart. But that's just what it is. Okay, go ahead, watch, you know, hello, you know. But, you know, we still have to do the work that we intend to do, right? And so that's really the nuts and bolts of that. Okay, but it really, in a larger part of the world, it's irrelevant. It doesn't even matter, the Du Bois Washington, because most of it is not true. Thank you, Chris Emmanuel. I appreciate it. Right. So I'm looking at Joel's comment, and yes, so, you know, neocolonialism, right? Everywhere we are, our relationships are exploited by capitalists. Listen, what we have to understand, and I love what someone in the group put in terms of the resources of Africa. I actually commented that this is awesome, but then it seemed like it went somewhere. I didn't put it in the right space, so you may not have seen that. But the point, the important point that is made in this study is that all of our relationships are exploited. And neocolonialism, right? It's white agenda in blackface. So all over the African continent, even out here in the diaspora, our conflicts are exploited. What can the Pan-Africanists do is prevent this in Africa? Seize the opportunity. When you have social conditions that happen, conflicts, outbreaks, wars, that is the moment, right, to raise the consciousness of the masses who suffer under those conditions, right? The masses are most interested in those dynamics at the moment that they suffer most from them. People may not care about the dynamics in South Africa until what's happening right now breaks out and impacts their life. They can't get food, they can't get this, they can't get that, right? Now that becomes an opportunity to raise the consciousness. It is what Garvey said, when all else fails to organize the people, conditions will. Our ultimate goal is unity. We think that our job is to fight them. The truth of the matter is that unity will insulate us and allow us to move in unison. And we're talking about impenetrable unity. That being said, your unity is not always forged through holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Sometimes unity is forged through fire, through conflict, through struggle, through ideological struggle, right? A refining process. So, okay, we definitely, Deborah Kelly, we definitely going to talk about that. This course is going to give you a couple of examples of how you can do that, okay? That's right. Thank you. I'm so happy, Denise Shabazz Muhammad. You're always here. Yes, absolutely. None of this is about them, and it's interesting because it depends on who I'm talking to. Some people get that because of where their consciousness is at. Some people will never get that. It's not about them. It's about us. It's always about us. It's always about what we're going to do. They can do whatever under the sun. And when I say they, I'm talking about, Europeans in particular, the people who buy into white supremacy and culture, the people who buy into what is colonialism and neo-colonialism and exploitation, they're going to be around. But we have been here forever, and we will be here. And it's all about what we do, right? And there are a number, I'm going to give you a number of different examples where we insulated ourselves from the micro level to the macro level, where we insulated from ourselves from a hostile environment. Okay, because they can be all around us and we can still be impenetrable. There are people, and I don't want to use other people as examples of what we should do per se, because we have a lot of examples of what we can do. But there are groups of people, cultures of people who are impenetrable, right? You can't infiltrate them. You can't, you can't use it as what we want to get with our own people. You don't want to be the host of white pathology, racism, xenophobia. And when we are the host of white pathology, it's called neo-colonialism, right? And it plays out with our people. Absolutely. Denise Shabazz, absolutely. This is why we have to raise our, because you don't raise the consciousness of your people. The guy right there, you don't have to be next to white people. Most of us are not next to so-called white people. But we still deal with white supremacy and culture. You know why? Because it resides in the minds of African people, Black people, who were colonized and indoctrinated with that. So the guy next to you will cut your throat, not even understanding that he is playing out the pathology of white supremacy and culture. Okay? This is why you can't just raise your own consciousness. You got to raise the consciousness to the guy next to you on the right and the left and behind you, most of all. Okay? All right. So some people are trying to have a problem writing comments. Thank you. Yes. Ramona White Brown. Thank you, Roland. Du Bois, Du Bois, like, listen, Du Bois was a certain kind of individual. Somebody asked about Du Bois. He probably was. Listen, I don't want to directly state what some people that I know who actually knew Du Bois. Can you imagine? There are people who knew Du Bois who are still alive, and one of which I worked with. But Du Bois is a complex individual. This is the thing with historical figures who were human beings, who lived and died like us, take the best of them. Don't take the worst of them. The top hat and the British gentleman, or whatever the case, whatever he called it, all of that about Du Bois, throw that away. We don't need that. Okay? What Du Bois did in understanding that as the sole survivor of the first conference, the first Pan-African Conference, that he must go on to establish the Pan-African Congresses and get the leadership of the African continent to come together and create a sort of think tank around their condition. That's what you want to know and remember about Du Bois. All that other stuff about Du Bois, throw it away. Even, really be quite frank with you, even the NAACP, even the Niagara movement stuff. Du Bois was really somebody, he did suffer from what he wrote about, double consciousness. But you don't have to suffer from that. I don't suffer from that. I don't know what he's talking about. I've never been in a white world. I've always been centered in my own African reality, and them folks are, they're there, they're the backdrop. But what is central in my life is what African people are doing. So every have double consciousness, you know, that's for people who are in white dominated spaces all the time around the clock. And truth be told, there are a lot of people who enjoy being in white dominated spaces. All, you know, they're the black mascot. That's not our problem, right? What we do from our ancestors is extract the best of what they have, and we extract instruction from history, problem-solving methodology. That is what that's all we do. We don't get caught up with them, and he probably could have been arrogant or not, or whatever the case may be. I don't know. Listen, the equivalent to the boys that exist now are arrogant. However, we're not concerned about that. Don't bring that to the table when we engage in strategizing around our struggle, right? So he might have been all of that, but the smart person, what we always have to be clear about what we do when we study history, we study historical figures and proponents and organizational bodies, is take the best practices, instruction, and bring that forward. We leave the rest of that stuff behind. Part of the reason why we're not as far as we could be internally in terms of unity is because there are some cautionary tales and there's some instruction and prescription in terms of how to resolve internal conflicts within our people that we're too sensitive to talk about. And therefore, we can't, this generation, the living generations, cannot get the best out of that. Meaning there are some things that have happened between African people. There are some pathologies and ideologies that African people have engaged in that were not good for us. And those same individuals also transform themselves. In the book that I'm talking about, in Booker T. Washington, Africa, I'm talking about Washington's transformation, how he goes from not understanding how he has to deal with Africa and African people to understanding how he has to deal with us and how he has to work as an agent for us, how he becomes a Pan-Africanist. If I wasn't able to talk about, because you'll see in the next section of the readings that I give you, you'll see he has a great failure. Okay, he does something that is catastrophic, Booker T. Washington in particular. But it's through that catastrophe that he learns the greatest lesson and repositions himself. If I, as the historian, as the researcher, as somebody who's going back and reclaiming our history, was afraid to talk about Washington's failure, I would not be able to talk about the victory, how he transformed himself. Right now, what I deal with as a younger scholar is I deal with older scholars who are too sensitive to talk about those transformative moments in our leadership or our proponents or our fighters' history, so that people on the ground can understand how to ideologically transform themselves. I hope I'm making myself clear. I'm going to revisit this very issue because it's a living issue, ongoing until we get it. And I engage in this kind of level of struggle. Sometimes it doesn't always pan out well because everybody is at different stages and phases of their development. But that being said, is that yes, we can talk about the low point, especially if the trajectory is that there was some development of an evolution that ultimately was to the benefit of African people. We should talk about those things, right? Especially when the person or the organization or the institution has brought themselves from being a pawn where white pathology, white supremacy and culture is played out to being an institution, organization, or individual where one is actually able to carry out practices that are beneficial to African people, right? If we can make that transformation, if that transformation exists for organization, individual, or institution, we should study that. That is what we want to capture. And it is instructive and prescriptive for how we want to forge ahead in developing ourselves. But what really has happened is we're very sensitive, right? Having to deal with white supremacy and culture for so long. So we don't want to talk about, they're looking over our shoulders regardless. Okay? They're looking over our shoulders regardless. Now it's about us, what we're going to do. Because if we do the right things, certain things live on. It's not just embodied in a person or one, individual. It belongs to people. So, I'll leave that there, but we have some more work to do. I'm gonna say this, and I'm not gonna explain it to her. Nature purges, just like everything. There's comes a time when certain ideas that are housed in human beings become old and antiquated. And what our job is to do is to take the best of those individuals and bring it forward. But nature resolves the existence of things that are not progressive, right? Thank you so much. I'm sorry for going over time. I did want to just at least see all your comments. I'm going to try to resolve the issue. My WhatsApp is like full of everything. I think I have too many groups on here, and I'm just administrators. If you can I'll just say openly, can you take me off of the groups that I'm not teaching? Because I have access to like a number of groups that I'm not teaching. I'm just teaching Pan-African history and organized. Those are only that are 7A, 7B, 7C, and 7D. All the other stuff I definitely don't need to see. Okay, so I have to send and resend because of the size of some of the documents that I send, and that's enough, right? So trying to do all of that, and very often I'm on my phone on the move, and so I don't need to see everything that's going on. Exactly. Thank you so much, Chris Emmanuel. The process of allowing Malcolm Little to become Malcolm X, absolutely, and then El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, exactly. Now, if we're too fragile to discuss Malcolm's transformation, but see, Malcolm was a beautiful soul. He discussed not really his transformation, but his return, because he comes out of a starched Garveyite reality, okay, household. Malcolm is really not the story of transformation or reinvention, as Marable had the nerve to say. Malcolm is really a story of Sankofa, return, and I lectured on this. But that being said, if we were too fragile to talk about the conversation of Malcolm's transformation, then we can't benefit from it. Together, we're robbed of it. And, we have a lot of, I'm just going to be very clear. In America in particular, we have a lot of Negro consciousness that's too fragile to talk about it. King made a transformation, right? He allowed white pathology to play out through him in the sense that he was a staunch chauvinist. And if you understand, I'm going to get into it as we go forward. If you understand the role of African women in the struggle of liberation, you don't never say that African women can't fully participate in the struggle for our liberation. We are an essential part of the African world and community. However, he did make a transformation. The problem is those people living right now are too sensitive, fragile, and ignorant to discuss it so that we can benefit and we can bring others who had the thinking that King had at one moment in time about women to the point where he was when he died, which was that he wasn't thinking like that. He understood, right? He understood the importance of Ella Baker, who was, the organizing tool behind him, right? He understood not to marginalize her, but we're not, that's indicative of our development right now, right? The old guard can't discuss those things. But it takes younger people like us who says, no, we're going to study their contradictions, and we're going to study how they overcame those contradictions. We're going to study how they made that transformation. We're going to study how they made what I really call, and I haven't really said this to you like this yet, but it's coming, how they overcame and how they engaged in the positive intellectual transformation of themselves and others. And how we reproduce that transformation so that we can develop our people into working, fighting, struggling in every way, and on fronts that all the fronts that we need are people to fight and struggle on, right? The work is with us. You know, it's never about other folks. It's with us. It's about what we're going to do. It's a very parochial, elementary view of the world to think that it's just about other folks. We are 1.5 billion on the continent. On the continent, African people on the continent are the youngest people in the world. Most of you are under 30 years old. And that's in stark contrast to the United States. The average American, 60 plus years old. On the African continent, you have the bulk of the world's resources. The arable land, as someone noted in the group, and I was just like, wow, this is powerful. The arable land on the continent of Africa could feed the world. Have a bulk of the world's resources concentrated on the equator, with a bulk of it in the Congo and the 9 surrounding countries. It's always about us, what we're gonna do. It's not about other people. Okay, we have the youngest people. We got the smartest people, fastest growing entrepreneurial groups, entrepreneurship in the world, entrepreneurial markets growing in Africa, largest entrepreneurial markets in the world in Africa, fastest growing. Right? It's about what Africans are going to do. They're all watching, waiting, and unfortunately, their pathology is paying out through us. Imagine when we take our minds back. So, and how you take your mind back is through going through an ideological process, intellectual and ideological transformation, a positive intellectual and ideological transformation. Okay, and Nkrumah talks about that in conscientism, how to transform oneself. But in the diaspora, we're just too sensitive. And it really don't matter in the diaspora because we don't have the resources to really pull weight in the world. What we have is ingenuity in the diaspora, right? But that's really it. Nobody needs America to eat, right? But the whole world needs Africa. But what we're doing right now, this technology that we are harnessing in order to do this comes out of Africa. Imagine if African people control it, right? So it's always with us. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. I saw most of your messages. Thank you, Deborah Kelly. All of you, thank you for being here. And I'm going to find out what's happening on the technological side in the WhatsApp group, but I'll keep it coming. And we're going to have more dialogue. We should have continuous dialogue about the journey of managed genetic odyssey, because at the prerequisite for this course is that you understand that you are the humans, not just human. You are the humans on this earth, right? And then we build from there. That's it. All right. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and evening. And you will get your new readings on Monday night. Well, so Monday. I don't know what time it is for some of you because we're all in different time zones. But you'll get your new readings on Monday, which can start getting into what I said, organizational bodies, the dialectical relationship between African people and some other things related to that, okay? All right, so I am because we are, all right?
Okay,
Thank you all for hanging in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your
All right. And sorry about going over, but this is why I like that I'm last. So I just bring up the end.
No,
Okay.
it's okay. We enjoyed
All right.
the lecture.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.